All right. So we are live, guys, and Rick's already starting. Cradle of Filth and Deftones. Yeah, exactly. Exactly what they sound like. So, what's up, YouTube? We're back for part one of a deep dive into the legendary, somewhat, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about that, but the legendary Bathory, and I want to kind of get into that a little bit. But I have an admission to make. Devon already kind of knows this. I have a list of probably 400 bands that I wanted to do deep dives on when I started doing these last year. And most of them are, the ones that I've done so far are kind of at the top of my list. Opeth, Porcupine Tree, Alice in Chains, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's at the top. This was not a band that was at the top of my list. It was in my list of bands to do, but it was never one that I was like, oh, I got to get that done. You know what I mean? And the reason I would say that is that, quite frankly, I haven't listened to this stuff in probably a decade. It's probably 10 years since I've thrown any of these albums on. Like, and then we'll get to why that is as we move through this. But when we kind of talked about doing something, Tyler, I know you wanted to do this, and I know Devin wanted to do this one. So I kind of was like, you know what? I think that what's the matter? Some good echoes.
I'm not. Well, of course,
Am
I'm
am I
listening to.
echoing?
I'm doing all this
No.
through my phone, so I don't hear any echo.
Okay. I don't know if
I think
Rick's
Rick's
just
stereo
kidding
system
or
is too banging.
Rick, let me know if I'm echoing or if that's just a joke because I'm kind of curious. So anyways, the whole thing with Bathory was, this would have been one that I'd have done maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. I was not an imperative one, but in a weird way, I'm kind of glad we ended up doing this because it made me go back and kind of re-dig into this catalog. Of course, just the first 6 albums, which we're talking about tonight. As for the second part, we'll see how I do. Health wise, it's a big question mark now. But I kind of wanted to do this one for Devin because he's been bugging me to do a deep dive of somebody for a while because he bailed out on the enslaved one after the first part, douchebag. And so this was kind of an opportunity for you two guys down there, Tyler and Devin, to really talk about one of your favorite bands. So let's kind of start with where we got into this band or how we got into this band. Then Devin, we're going to do something a little different tonight. I'm going to let Devin talk about the history of the band. I'm not going to much unless, I have something to add. And any of you guys want to throw any tidbits in, by all means, do that. But so Devin, let's start with you since you're the youngest cat here. How about we start with you in terms of like where you came in and how you came into this band?
So I honestly don't remember how I found them, but I do know the first album I ever heard was the self-titled, and at first I completely hated it. Because that and Transylvanian Hunger were the first 2 black metal albums I ever heard. And it just sounded like complete noise back then. I'm like, oh, what is this? This sucks. But I obviously learned to appreciate it later, but...
Well,
That's fair.
That was
Fair.
2015 or 16, I think.
Man.
Okay, so all these albums were almost 30 years old by then? No. Yeah.
Yeah.
84.
Yeah,
94,
31 was the debut.
It's about 30 years old. So, like I've said, I have shoes that are probably older than you, quite frankly. How about you, Tyler? Where did you come in? This was in your high school years, right?
Yeah. So I really got big into black metal like 1995, and the first few black metal albums I got, and then reading the magazines or whatever, they always all the thank you lists and all the influence lists or whatever always mention Bathory. And I remember the local shop that I would pick up all my shit at had had pretty much all the Bathory albums at that time. And I just didn't know where to start because I was like, wow, this is kind of quite the discography. And it's not like there was Metal Archives. There wasn't like YouTube links for me to check shit out. So, and actually I kind of failed. I can't find my copies of the first 2 Jubileum compilations, but that's where I started. I actually picked up Jubileum Volume 1 because it had kind of an all-encompassing, spectrum of the band in the various different styles. And yeah, kind of like what Devon said, like some of the really, really early tracks, I was like, I don't know, it's cool, it's thrashy, but I'm not really feeling it too much. And then I don't know, it grew on me pretty fast. And then I really jumped around the catalog. Like the first actual Bathory album I got was Twilight of the Gods. And then I circumvented my way backwards and forward, just listen to them, when I felt the mood at the local shop. And so Twilight was the first one I got into, and then Bloodfire Death after that. And then Under the Sign was after that. So I skipped Hammerheart for whatever reason, and then I came back to it. So
we're going to get to all those albums, and that's interesting that you started with Twilight, because he was well into the Viking progs, sort of thing at that point. Very, very, very different from the first two.
Oh, way different.
And even the third and fourth. We'll kind of get into the progression of that pretty quick. Jimmy, how about you?
I think the first thing I heard was probably either Hammerheart or Twilight of the Gods, which would have been like probably early 2000s. I mean, I didn't really get into any kind of black metal kind of stuff until, close to my 30s. And when I heard, I don't remember which album it was, because to me, those are kind of almost like, we'll get into that later, but I didn't like it at all. I mean, it just didn't appeal to me at the time. And I guess I kind of got like a sort of skewed perspective on Bathory because of that, because I was not aware of how different, like the early albums. I mean, there's so many different, I mean, I don't want to call them eras, because he really kind of changed a lot between each album from the first albums, but I didn't know about, I kind of just assumed that that's what it was. It was all this sort of metal kind of thing. So I have to admit, over the years, as I've kind of gone back to them and heard other people discuss Bathory, and knowing that they influenced a lot of bands that I really dig, I've gone back over those years and kind of would go check things out here and there. But I'll admit that I don't have the most, historied, experience with the band, other than really knowing what Quorthon did, what he, what albums really kind of influenced the second wave, and how that all kind of unfolded. So it's still to this day, I would say I'm still like fairly familiar with like the first half of the discography, but later on there's still stuff that I've never even really listened to. So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. I remember very distinctly the summer of '85, my buddy Dave Ernst, he, in the '80s, early '80s, I was listening to a lot of hair metal, because that's, I was in high school from '80 to '84, and you had stuff like Metal Health, Quiet Riot, you had Rat Out of the Cellar, you had Motley Crue's first two albums, Shout at the Devil, all that stuff. That's the shit I was listening to. That's the bands I was going to see. '83, '84, I was going to see Zebra and Loverboy and Quiet Riot and Motley Crue and Rat and, Accept and stuff like that. That was the metal I was listening to, along with the '80s stuff, which I still love a lot of '80s stuff, and my '70s prog and all that stuff. So when the summer of '85, I remember we were partying or something at his house one night after work. We had a summer job where we worked second shift loading styrofoam cup boxes in tractor trailers, and we went home one night. Old Milwaukee 16 ounces was the way to go. Of course, we drank fine. We were high level drinkers and elevated, and
High class there.
exactly. And we were sitting around getting fucking hammered, and he's like, "Dude, you got to hear this." And we were really into the Queensryche EP from '83, I believe that was. And Queensryche had put out The Warning at the tail end of '84, and he had The Warning, he had Melissa, and he had this album, Bathory's first album. And what I remember specifically was, though, that summer there was a bunch of dudes that I worked with were a bunch of fucking stoners and I mean, when I say stoners, these guys came into work stoned, they got stoned at work, and then they got stoned after work, and they were really into Grim Reaper. See You in Hell was a big one,
Oh fuck yeah.
and of course, Maiden and Priest and Slayer and everything. But what I really, really remember was Kerrang was the big import magazine of that era. It was like the only, there was, of course, there was stuff like Hit Parader and Crawdaddy and Cream and stuff like that in America, but they were kind of lame. This, Kerrang was like this cool magazine because it was all the European bands that you had to get as imports, right?
Mhm.
And I remember, man, there for like 2 years or so, all the big stories were always about Corthon and Bathory. And I was like, I'd see these pictures and I'd see him sitting there with like chunks of meat and blood, and it was like, come on, this shit's cheesy as fuck. Like, seriously, like, really? So my impression was this band, whatever, is, it's cheese factory shit. It's like Motley Crue, but European. And we put the album on, and I was like, what the fuck is this, man? Like, it was not what I expected it to be. And that was my first impression of it. And I remember very distinctly playing The Warning, Melissa, and the first Bathory album. And I hated Bathory, and I hated fucking Melissa because I couldn't stand King Diamond's.
Yeah.
The music was killer. But I couldn't stand that. And the one thing I kept thinking about the Bathory was, this sounds like Venom. So let's get into that. Let's talk about that because that's a very important factor. Now, the first album, Devon, you want to show the first album? You have it?
I thought I was doing the mini history thing. You
Oh,
told me to type
yeah,
that.
we did. Oh, shit. Thank you. I'm sorry. So, yeah, let's talk about history, and I'll blow you up here, and you can jump into that.
So I'm gonna butcher the fuck out of most of these names, so I apologize. Actually, no, I don't. I don't care. But okay, so Bathory formed in Villenberg. I don't know what the fuck. In March 1983, Corthon was 17 years old. Was joined by bassist guitarist Frederick Melandier and drummer Jokas Ackerland. According to Corthon, he settled on the name Bathory after a visit to the London dungeon. Although Jonas says that it was inspired and taken by the Venom song Countless Bathory. The Venom song was based on the life of Elizabeth Bathory, who was believed to be one of the most prolific female murderers in history. Before settling on Bathory, the band considered several names, including Nosferatu, Natas, Mephisto, Elizabeth Bathory, and Countless Bathory. Corthon worked part-time in a small record label. Trifon Gramophone? Yeah, I don't know.
Typhon Gramophone.
Close enough. Which was partly owned by his father, Boris Forsberg. In late 1983, the label was put together a compilation of songs by Scandinavian metal bands. However, at the last minute, one of the bands backed out. Typhon agreed to let Bathory appear on the record as a replacement. The album called Scandinavian Metal Attack was released in March 1984 and was the first Bathory's first appearance on the record. The two Bathory tracks were titled Sacrifice and The Return of Darkness and Evil, which drew a great deal of fan mail. Soon afterwards, Typhon asked Corthon to record a full-length album. His bandmates having moved away, Corthon rescued Richard Berkman and his former oi punk band's never mind. As bassist, and Stefan Lausfen from a punk band, as a drummer. On May 22nd, 1984, they had their first and only rehearsal together before recording the album. 2 songs were recorded in that day in the rehearsal: Witchcraft and Satan My Master, making it the first recording on the debut lineup. Bathory stopped performing live in 1985 with Corthon viewing organization scandals as too much of a hassle.
All right, so that's the basic gist of the formation of the band. I think it should be noted that a couple things to note here. First of all, there's a very good. I struggle with talking about this, but I did watch the Metal Mythos. You know who that guy is? The Rageaholic dude.
Yeah.
Okay, he does these really well done, produced kind of deep dives where it's just him talking about the history of the band and whatnot. He does a really good one on this. He's a difficult guy. I don't agree with his politics. I don't really like him as a person, and I don't think he gives a shit about that. And I'm sure he'd tell me that. But he's doing way better than I am at the YouTube game, so I don't think he really cares what I think. But he does do a nice job on these deep dives, and you know, the one thing that really I think a lot of people that know any history about this band and this guy is that he was not very truthful about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and the first 3 albums, he had a different lineup for every one. And starting from Blood, Fire, Death through Blood on Ice, he had different band members that went on different names. So the drummer was nicknamed Vars 4, and the bass player was named Cathar, but it doesn't say how often they actually changed members. So it could have been different guys every single album. So
I think we also ought to mention too, they all had nicknames in the first iteration of the band, and that was Quorthon was his name Tom. What is his name again? Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Thomas
Forsberg.
Okay. Thomas Forsberg. But he would tell people his name was Stefan Forsberg, who I believe is a hockey player. And he also his original nickname, because he was a big Kiss fanatic, was Ace Shot. Very bizarre. And then when they actually formed the band, the bass player was called Hanoi, and the drummer, which is Jonas Åkerlund, who did Lords of Chaos movie, he his nickname was Vans McBurger, of all things, man. I mean, like, such an evil fucking name, you know what I mean? But very, very strange. The history of this band is almost, you could do like a whole episode just on that alone. So the first album came out October 1984 because of that. He did the thing, Scandinavian Metal Attack was where he had 2 tracks on the album, and they had Return of Darkness and Evil and Sacrifice on there. And they blew up. Like 95% of the response from the album was about Bathory's songs, not the other Euro thrash bands. There was a thrash band on there that sounded like the Scorpions called, I think they were called Trash or something like that. So there was, and I've never gotten that comp. I've never been a comp chaser. I'm not sure why. A lot of people are, but I'm not. But anyways, this album.
And I was going to say, Sacrifice ended up on the self-titled, and The Return ended up on The Return. So
Right.
And the one that's on The Return is the re-recorded version of it.
Yeah.
It's a different version.
Correct. So the first album came out in October 1984. I don't have an actual date. I couldn't find one. It was recorded in Heaven Shore Studios, which was basically Boss Forsberg, his garage at his house. It was engineered and produced by Quorthon and the Boss, called the Boss, who was his dad. And for quite a long time, he would never confirm that it was his dad, but it was his dad. And they created a imprint label called Blackmark, which was all of his stuff was released on. Go ahead, Devon. Sorry. Right, there you go. And Typhon was the major label then, like his dad's label. So let's kind of talk about this album. Initially, he was gonna call the band. The album was gonna be called Pentagrammaton, but I guess people kept seeing it as Pentagon, so they decided to change. Just go with so they went with the basic thing. So they go with the OG name, the Bathory name, and the label is supposed to be gold originally, but the cost of it was going to cost too much to print, so it ended up being sort of an off gold, which was yellow. And allegedly, there's only about 1,000 of those copies out there, and they go for a pretty penny, man. I mean, to get an original one of those,
it's like $1,000.
How much?
It's like $1,000.
Yeah, over $1,000. So, and I read a story in a comment on, who knows whether the guy's being truthful or not, but one of the guys said he got one originally, and he finally got tempted to sell it and sold it for $1,600 a couple years ago. So, I'd have a hard time saying no to $1,600 myself. So,
Man,
yeah, his name's
you
Rageaholic or Razor Fist.
got to be doing a lot of blow to do that. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. That guy's name. Is, he was originally called Razor Fist, and now he's Rageaholic. He does mostly. I don't even know if he does his Metal Mythos stuff anymore. If he does, it's been a while.
He does. He does.
Does he? Okay. He's primarily.
He concentrates on some really obscure bands, like some obscure Japanese bands. And
is that a YouTube channel or is that?
Yeah. Rageaholic. He primarily does political commentary, and he's a hard right dude. He's a very much a free speech, right wing kind of guy, and I'm more centrist, a little bit more liberal on the liberal side when it comes to like social issues. Probably a little on the right when it comes to fiscal stuff like that. So I don't watch him very much, but I know he does gaming too. I think he does a lot of live streams gaming. So he's kind of, I would suggest if you want to watch some cool docs that are done well, check him out, but I don't endorse his politics. That's just my personal trip there. Real quick, like I said, the first 1,000 were yellow, then they went to black and white. And so let's talk a little bit about this. Like, I had forgotten what this album sounded like. And the minute I threw it on, I was reminded of two bands. So, Tyler, let's start with you. What two bands am I thinking of?
Probably Venom and Motorhead.
Exactly.
There's one other I'm thinking of too, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Yeah. And I didn't have to look up the history. I listened to it, was like, this sounds like Motorhead and Venom.
Yep.
And yet, let's throw in there, Quorthon was often quoted as saying he'd never heard of Bathory until the first album comes out.
Never heard of Bathory, you mean Venom?
I've never heard of Venom.
Yeah, that's a load of horse shit. There's no way I believe that in a million years. No way.
Yeah, there's absolutely no fucking way.
So go ahead. Tell me what your thoughts on this album.
Well, it definitely, what I like about this album is, sure, it kind of cops that Venom style and sound, but I guess maybe through teenage angst or something, it's got a little more of an edge to it. And I think that's the thing I appreciate about the early Bathory stuff is it's obvious he was influenced by Venom. I mean, in his pictures, he's wearing like the skin tight leather pants and the spikes and all that shit. But Venom always had like a level of campiness to it, and that you can just see it was campy. But the old Quorthon pictures, they're black and white, and like you said, he's holding on hunks of meat and swords, and he's trying to look evil. And I mean, he looks goofy as shit because dude's like butt pen in those photos. But like, there's I don't know, there's a certain aesthetic to it that sets it apart. Like, I don't like Venom like at all, really. I like At War with Satan, and that's about it. But I like this. I like the early Bathory shit. Like, I don't know why. There's that. Like I said, there's a little bit more of an evil edge or aesthetic to it that I appreciate. But something I wanted to bring up on this first album is, there's always an argument that goes around of whether or not he actually had a drummer, like a live drummer on it.
Right.
Because you listen to tracks like Necromancy, and I think a couple other ones, there's parts where like there's cymbals going and he's doing like snare fills, like three-handed shit. And it just little quirky things. And like one of the last tracks, I think, was it Armageddon. Yeah, Armageddon, like the pacing is so all over the place, which I guess would fit for a guy who has a background supposedly as a punk drummer. But I brought up a point, like, I think he was hammering out some of the drum shit on like a Casio keyboard, like on, you know what I mean? Just the inconsistencies and the fact that there wasn't really a lot of drum fills, but when there was, it was almost like, is that like that D Mysterious Dom Sathanas thing where, Hellhammer recorded basic drums and then he went back and overdubbed tom fills. It was almost a similar deal with some of the parts on this first Bathory album. To me. Where like there was a basic part that was recorded and then there was some extra shit that was slapped on top.
Yeah, there's definitely tempo issues throughout the first two albums, I think. If of anything, my biggest criticism of the first two albums is the drum sounds. They just, as a drummer, Tyler, what's your impression of those, man? Whoa. If it's a
Well,
drum machine, it's hard to tell. It sounds acoustic. It sounds acoustic at times, but it also sounds like a drum machine at times.
well, like I said, it sounds like real drums, and honestly, it sounds like how drums were recorded at the time. Like, I mean, you think of like the earliest Sodom and Creator albums. All the drums sounded fucking hella deep. I mean, guys are probably playing on like, the smallest rack tom is probably like a 14-inch rack tom or some shit, and everything's tuned low and everything's bass heavy and low end. So you get a lot of that on this. But yeah, some of it reminds me of like my mom's old Casio keyboard, and I'd set up on the drum setting on that and fucking tap keys to get drum sounds. It sounds like that too. Because I mean, when you think about when this came out, like that would be the earliest days of like the drum machine, like strict drum machine technology.
Yeah.
And just, I'm sure programming was probably a colossal pain in the ass.
Oh, it had to be.
Yeah, I mean, just like anything else old school, I guess, like, but I don't know. Like, I like it. I like the aesthetic. Because you can still hear everything that's going on. The other thing I noticed, and it's funny because this copy I have is it's the remastered that came out. Like, I think these CDs originally came out in 91, and then Black Mark released immediate reissues in like 93 or 94 that were remastered. But the thing that the remastering did is it brought out like production inequalities from track to track. Like there's a couple of tracks where Corthon's vocals were kind of overpowering in the mix, and there's other ones where he's really buried in the mix. And just,
you can hear some level issues throughout this album and the next one a little bit too.
Yeah.
What about specific tracks? Any specific tracks jump out at you? I will say this. Well, let me throw my thing out there so you guys can get deeper on it. For me, this album is kind of like there's like two different variations of songs on here.
Mhm.
Most of them fall into the Motorhead / Venom.
Mhm.
They're following that same pattern almost entirely, and then you click to the next song, and it's like, oh, that's the same song as that song. Oh, that's the same song as that song. However, there is an aesthetic, like you said. There's kind of a I don't want to call it evil yet, and it's evil, but it's probably mainly because of his voice and the way that he's singing that kind of evokes that, but it doesn't sound scary evil on this album. It just sounds nasty and kind of.
It sounds like
gnarly
music that a angsty teenage kid would make,
right?
To try to sound badass,
Devon,
I mean,
give me your impressions of this album, Devon.
Yeah, I agree. So, you want my favorite song first?
Well, however you want to do it.
Yeah, he said he wasn't influenced by Venom. Explain this thing, Corthon. Really?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I'll make another point about that when we get to the return, but this one, I think a lot, like, the bands from, like, Norway and Sweden, they were listening to this that came later. They were listening to, like, Under the Sign. All the black and thrash bands that came later, like Absu, Disaster, Sabbath, Abigail, they were listening to this one. They weren't listening to The Sign. So,
yeah,
all those bands that were coming out from the like black and thrash scene, they were definitely taking more influence from this and the return than the other records. But favorite song on here, probably Sacrifice or Raise the Dead. But Raise the Dead's definitely one of the most slower tracks, which I was
just gonna say, Raise the Dead is probably the one doomy track on there. It's probably my favorite track.
Yeah, I hear like a little bit of like almost Candlemass influence in Raise the Dead.
Tiny little bit.
With different vocals, obviously, but
I would say more a Sabbath influence in a weird way. It's got
that because Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus came out after that first Bathory album.
Yeah, I was gonna say
like a year later.
It was, yeah. So I would say more the Sabbath thing where he slows. That's the one track where he really slows the tempo down and slows the guitars down, and it's noticeable. And his vocals come through a little bit more evil and haunting. I mean, for me, Reaper, Necromancy, Sacrifice, and Raise the Dead are kind of the four standout tracks because they're almost memorable. The other ones really aren't that memorable to me. I mean, War kind of is the way it starts.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's not really a super catchy tune for me. Jimmy, what's your impression of it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is that you can't help but just recognize how iconic that artwork is. I mean, just at least the gold goat. There's just something about that is really just really cool. But for me, like we're talking about Venom and Motorhead influence. I mean, from my perspective, it's hard for me to say because I don't really go deep with either of those bands. Like Venom, like is not a band I ever really went really deep with. I probably need to at some point. Motorhead, I dig Motorhead. That's not a band I ever really went real hard with, even though I can still recognize the the influence of the music on this. And for me, listening to this, I really love this record. It's just I love the pure teenage like angst coming out of it. I kind of remember when I first started playing drums. I mean, as far as talking about the drumming, I mean, yeah, Stefan Larsson wasn't really that great of a drummer, but it was more of a punk rock thing.
Exactly.
Where it's like you're allowed like to be sloppy and just kind of like more in the moment. And that's kind of what I feel from the music on this. But one of the other bands that really came to mind, I find a really uncanny like similarity to the riffing style of Dave Mustaine, which is interesting. And I'm talking like early Megadeth, like Killing Is My Business Megadeth. And I don't know if that's because they were both ripping off Venom and Motorhead, or was that really like that guitar style, like that sort of like really fast speed, like but bluesy kind of style, like a hint of a blues in there. And then I looked it up, and Megadeth had not released Killing As My Business until 1985, which was a year after the Bathory self-titled. Right. They had released the demo at this point, so I don't think there was any way that either of them would have influenced each other at that point, unless maybe he was getting some of that from the Kill 'Em All era. But there is there's a unique similarity in the riffing there, and I mean, this is their debut, so obviously he doesn't really know where he's going. He's like trying to like figure out his voice and figure out what is he going to do with the band, right? And if you look at the Bathory catalog, I think that's really interesting because like this really kind of stands apart from anything they really did. And, I mean, I wouldn't say that this was really the main influence on the second wave of black metal. I think there's an element there. I think Devon was really nailed it on the head there with bands like the black and thrash kind of stuff. And this is kind of where that harkens back to the Absus of the world and things like that really kind of honed in on the style here. It just kind of like perfected it. But yeah, it's a really interesting listen. It's a hell of a piece of history for sure. And I don't know, man. It's for a debut and considering where they're going to go, listening to it more and more since we decided to do this, I've really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, go ahead.
It's rather interesting because, as I said, I probably haven't listened to this in this one I may have given a listen to online maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but it's you nailed it. I think it's a historical document. It is derivative of several things that were going on at the time, i.e. Motorhead, which the one thing about Motorhead is that what do they have, Devon? 26 albums, 22 albums, something
22.
Crazy? 22. And let's be honest, man. I love Motorhead, but there's not a lot of variation in their albums. They're kind of what you're going to get with a Motorhead album. Sort of the same thing with Venom. And I, like you, Jimmy, and you, Tyler, was not a massive Venom fan. I remember checking them out way back in 82, 83 and being like, ugh, those vocals, man, ugh, always
And they're
the
pretty
vocals.
sloppy too.
And they're sloppy, yeah. But I have to say, listen to this album. I think it's the one I listened to the most when we dug back in here. And there's some sort of innocent sort of charm in this album. Do I think it was, I hear and read and you hear people say, oh man, black metal, it came from Bathory and Merciful Fate. And it's like, nah, not the first wave of black metal, man. It was its own thing. And sure, it drew reference points to the San Francisco thrash era. It drew and the German thrash, the German and the Sodoms and the fucking creators and stuff. But it's hard. Well, here you go. Kevin says because of bands like Bathory, Venom, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, we get Darkthrone, Dissection Emperor. Right. It was the next logical movement, but I don't hear really any black metal in this album at all. I don't really hear what I would call blast beats because they're there, but they're not really there. They're not what I typically think of as blast beats because the timing is sort of wonky and all over the place, it sounds to me. The other thing is you don't hear any tremolo pick guitars. There's no tremolo guitar on this album. It's thrash chords. It's San Francisco thrash chords for the most part and European metal like Venom and Motorhead. So, the next two albums, now we start to move into a little bit more of a black metal direction. We'll get there in a sec. But yeah, those bands like Bathory, Venom, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost were kind of the ground level for setting the stage for the first wave of black metal.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that. I mean, I don't doubt that this album was influential on those bands. For sure it was, but
oh yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, to me, this album it's a fun listen. And to me, it's a fucking punk rock record. I mean, it's a punk rock record with blackened vocals that's starting to kind of see where it's going. But to me, it very much, I mean, like has that punk rock aesthetic to it, whether it's Motorhead or Venom or whatever it is. It's still very, very much the bare bones of what he's doing. It has
speed
that
metal,
rock, yeah, speed metal, any of those things. And obviously they had a lot of fun doing it. And the guy wrote great riffs on this thing, and there was good solos, even rudimentary as they might have been, but speed solo kind of stuff. I mean, that was definitely developing his guitar skills into something really great.
When did the first Slayer out? When did Show No Mercy come out?
83.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so right there's another reference point that you could draw. There's no question that Slayer was, and I remember again to go back to, because I was there buying these magazines, and God damn it, until February of 2 years ago, I had them all in my storage unit. Now somebody else owns them. Long story, but anyways, that first Slayer album had to have been an influence. It had to have been because you can hear it.
There's a picture of Quorthon hanging out with Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King.
There is one? Okay, well, there you go.
You want to find it?
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see, yeah. So, what I hear in this album is kind of a thrash album with more of a European flair to it, with the evil topic, the evil lyric topics. Okay, let me see. Hold on.
Oh, cool.
What year is that? What year is that?
That's... I don't know. It looks like Hell Awaits AO Slayer, so I'm going to say 85.
Okay. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, there's no way, once again, that there's no way in my mind that Quorthon could have avoided hearing Slayer or Venom. There's no question those were influences. And so, but he came up like Jimmy said, and it's very important to note that there's a good element of punk rock that's in this album, and it makes it really enjoyable to listen to. And the lo-fi-ness of this album isn't really all that lo-fi. It's lo-fi, but it's not terrible. With the exception of the drumming being a little bit difficult, it actually sounds pretty fucking good. Anybody want to throw out favorite tracks real quick? Jimmy, how about you?
I'd probably go with it's kind of hard because I mean the album does kind of blend together a bit, but I would definitely say Raise the Dead because that's so catchy. But Necromancy and Reaper, I love Reaper. The second track, yeah. Mm-hmm. Just fun.
And Storm of Damnation. is a really cool intro. It's fucking haunting and creepy and weird, and I mean, that's a neat way to get things started. And like Rick just said here too, this is a good point too. I don't think it was called this back then, but people call it black and thrash. But I think that that's a good way to talk about this particular Bathory album. It might be the first black and thrash album, along with perhaps maybe some of the Venom catalog.
Right. And like Devon said, I mean, like bands like Absu and what were some of the other ones you mentioned, Devon? Like
Sabbath, Disaster.
Sabbath.
And even before the 90s, the bands from Brazil, like early Sepultura, Max has said he was trading with Corthon back in the day.
No shit. That I did not know. That's pretty fucking cool, actually. Yeah. So the one thing that I do want to comment on, because we're going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this in a different light in a couple of albums, but the vocals, man, I really like these vocals, and I don't exactly know why. I really dig them. They're nasty. They're kind of biting and acerbic. And do they sound super evil? Not as much on this one as the next one. And then the third one, I think they sound more evil on the third album than they do on the first two. They're more punky on these first two, but I love them. I really do. And
there's conviction, absolute conviction.
Yeah, exactly.
Corthon's into it 1,000% when he's recording that shit.
Kevin, I'm gonna admit to something, dude. I barely know any Sodom, and I get shit from that youngster down below there. I just don't really know them or I did not get into the German scene. I don't really know Creator all that well, very well either.
No,
I should,
Kevin's
but
right.
I don't.
That Obsessed by Cruelty is, I mean, that's another influential album on the black metal scene for sure.
That's the one. Is that the one with the hooded guy on it?
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the songs they even refer to themselves as black metal.
You know what I was thinking? Well, there's a song on that album called Death Like Silence. That's what they got the record label name from.
Oh, yeah.
Ah. Wait,
and
there's a song on Obsessed by Cruelty called Death Like Silence.
Yeah, and there's pictures of Dead wearing a Persecution Mania t-shirt.
Well, there you go. So Sodom is another one. Sodom and Creator. When was Creator's first album? Was that 85 though?
85. After the debut, though, they didn't have any of that sound anymore, though. Just Endless Pain had that sound.
Yep.
So I don't know. I tend to do this just because I do it. You guys don't have to, but I tend to rate these out of it on a 10 scale. And I have to be honest with you, this one probably is like an 8 out of 10 for me. If the production was a little better, I think I probably would have liked it a little bit more, but it's also part of the charm is that the production isn't great. I think that if you spruce the production up on this thing, it might not have the same effect,
Well,
so you guys want to give it a number, or you want to just move on from that? You don't have to.
I don't need to. Honestly, the first 6 albums are basically 10 out of 10 albums for me. Just
okay,
because I'll leave it at that. Like they're just.
God damn it, Jimmy! You've infected Tyler with your 10 out of 10 shit.
No more 10 out of 10s for me, man. I'm not doing that again.
If we get to do the second half of the deep dive, there's definitely not going to be 10 out of 10s until.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm aware. There's probably going to be a couple negative ones for me. Devin, you don't do the number, right?
For this one, 7.5.
Jimmy? About that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably where I'm at, 7.5, 8, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But it's
great record.
One other thing to note about this before we move on. The really nice thing about this album is it's 26 minutes. It gets in, it gets out, it clocks you upside the face. And sure, you can go, yeah, it kind of blends together because it does. But there's just enough variation in what's going on that it's an enjoyable listen. And you're not wedded to it, Although the shitty thing is, I don't know. I guess since I don't have the album, is it just like 13 or 14 minutes aside? I would imagine. Devin?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, all right, we ready to move on to number 2 album?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, so Devin, you want to show that one? I'll do some history on it quick. It's called The Return. Came out on Typhon Gramophone in Europe and Combat in the U.S., which is pretty interesting. It was produced by Q Quorthon and Boss, his dad. Came out 5/27/1985, and Anders Johansson was the bass player, and Larson was the drummer on this. Right? Am I correct?
I believe
Yeah,
so.
but it's Bathory, so who the fuck knows?
Well, but what's it say in the liner notes? I want to make sure because I didn't think that was the same two guys.
Produced
It's
by
not the same
Boston
two guys as the
Quorthon.
first one.
Yeah, it doesn't say who played on
Yeah.
it. It just says like credits.
Okay.
Yeah, the early Bathory albums, they didn't credit a full band. It was just music written by Quorthon.
Well, the thing is, though, on the first band, wasn't the drummer Jonas Ackerland, or did he record with them or not?
No.
No.
I think
He
was
only
with
did
them.
He
He didn't
only
record
did
any of the albums.
Okay, he did the demo tracks and the thing on the Scandinavian Metal Attack.
Yeah, he only did Scandinavian metal.
Okay, so was it the same two guys on the first album, Devon, allegedly?
Let me see.
Yeah.
Larson and Johansson?
Yes.
Okay. You can confirm that, Devon, see what you got there. Jimmy, you want to give me your impression of this one first? We'll jump around.
Yeah, sure. Oh man. This one, I think this is obviously the very kind of short-lived start of the real, I guess, black metal. I would call this record. And I never really gave it too much of a chance for a long time until getting prepared for this. I think I listened to this thing like 6 times in the last week. And I got to tell you, man, this thing's got a charm to it that I've got a newfound love for this album because it's kind of a mess.
Yeah.
It's the drumming is not that good, but then every now and then like, he throws a fill in that's like, whoa, cool. That was a cool fill, But
and on the title track, there's actually some double bass.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely quite a departure from the debut, and it's to me like it's really interesting to listen to because I think at this point this record, nothing has really quite been done like this, and I think obviously this is where we start seeing the influence on the second wave from this album, but still at this point. It's the kind of album that requires quite a few listens to really, maybe you might just like it immediately, maybe at the time, because it's so, it's just so, primal and just sort of like just bare bones, very like what's the word I'm looking for? Just
I think
stripped
primal
out kind of thing.
Primal is a good word. Primal
Yeah,
is a really good word.
And I gotta say, I love his vocals on this album because they're just they're so like
Nasty.
There's times where it's just funny almost, like it just
Yeah.
makes me laugh because it's just like, but I don't know. It's just it's got a really unique charm to it that it's obviously a lot more evil feeling. It's not like the kind of drunken punk fest that we got from the first record. It's more going into this really dark place, but at the same time still being kind of fun in a way. Like I listen to it and I have fun with it because it's kind of like there are moments on it that are almost borderline ridiculous. I'm like, really, did they do that? It's kind of funny, like moments in Bestial Lust and Reap of Evil. That one is so good. But it, man. I mean, it's again, like I said, it's kind of a mess, but I'm easy to look past those things and recognize this album for what it is. And it's another lesson in history on where a lot of bands kind of looked towards. I don't even think so much it was in the music. I think it was in the vibe of what they were trying to kind of put across with this, because it's not like you're not hearing blast beats and, it's not like you would hear what black metal would eventually become. Even in the second wave, it was still kind of dirty, but I mean, I don't know, man. I had a lot of fun with this one, getting ready for this for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a mess really kind of sums it up in a lot of ways. It's a organized mess is what it is. I mean, there's just enough organization to it that it retains this and I think maybe the word that I would use to is it just has an aura about it. When you're listening to it, it just has this weird vibe and aura to it that feel much more evil than the first one. I would disagree with Kevin, and I'm not sure this is still the first what I think of first wave black metal. The tremolo picking, the blast beats. I don't hear it so much on this. I hear this as kind of a extension of what the first album was, in that it's a little more refined as far as the compositions go. Particularly the song "Born for Burning," which really has like that just has a really cool vibe to it. And
that's a great fun track. Yeah.
Well, that's basically "Don't Burn the Witch" by Venom.
Is it?
Listen to the that's "Don't Burn the Witch."
Okay, and that makes sense. The other one, Reap of Evil, like you said, it's got that buzzsaw guitars in it. It's not HM2 yet. We're not really talking HM2, which would be more the death metal thing. It's more the buzzsaw-y, sound of stuff. Return of Darkness is really evil. And what's the last one here? What's that? Can't read my own writing.
Son of the Damned.
Son of the Damned. That has some blast beats in it, and the buzzsaw stuff. This album has it's much more malevolent sounding. It's just got more of a malevolence to it for some reason.
More like an evil atmosphere to it.
Yeah, good. And that's where I would agree that maybe it's the first black metal album in that respect, in terms of the malevolent atmosphere of it. But I still don't think it has all the hallmarks of what we think of as, the Mayhems and the Immortals and the Burtsum and all that stuff like that.
But there was some bands playing slow, like Samael or the Greek stuff, that took influence from this too, because they didn't use tremolo picks at all. Like, they were mostly like more mid-paced. So
there you go.
Real heavy groove stuff.
There's more variation on this than the first album too. A lot more variation in terms of the composition. So again, my only issue with this is the drums sound. They're all over the place sometimes. They almost sound like there's lots of tempo issues in them, which, I'm not a drummer, but I can, you can hear it.
I mean, think about where these guys were recording, like how they were recording. I mean,
yeah, they weren't using a click track at all.
Yeah, there wasn't some studio pro sitting in there, like, with the old school tick tock metronome. Like, I mean, shit. I mean, all your 70s prog bands, they didn't play with click tracks either, but they're like vastly more seasoned musicians too,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. They may, for all intents and purposes, they may have been recording this in a garage somewhere that was converted into a studio.
This was the only one actually done in a real studio.
Oh, this one was
really? And he was apparently hammered recording the entire thing.
What was the studio? Because I couldn't find that. Where what was this, Montezuma?
I don't know. It was Quothon, so he's probably full of crap, but who knows?
I think was it Montezuma?
Let me see.
According to Metal Archives, it says Electra Studio in Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh wow! Okay.
Electra.
So that would have been interesting. Well, I mean, they had Combat.
Yeah, it says Electra in Stockholm on this too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Devon.
That's ironic because it
Tell me about this, Devon.
So I believe this was the first Bathory album I ever bought. I agree, it's definitely closer to black metal, but I still say it's pretty thrashy but less Motorhead sounding. But favorite song in here, probably Son of the Damned or Born for Burning. I love that opening riff. But
yeah, it's a great riff.
Definitely, I agree his vocals are better than this. Still, the drumming kind of sucks, but
you can hear the guitar starting to be a little bit more. You can hear him progressing as a guitar player, as a writer. How about you, Tyler? What's your impression of the album? 10 out of 10.
So I still say, just because of influence, it's a 10 out of 10 album. But admittedly, out of the first trio of albums, I've listened to this one by far the least. I listened to the first album more than I listened to this one.
I think
And
I would too.
it's kind of weird because everyone cites the return as like, oh, that's where the aesthetic, that's where that black metal, you know, evil vibes, you know, stems from. And yeah, you listen to the intro track, like 3.5 minutes of screaming and murky sounds and cavernous whatever, and it sets a tone for sure. And I guess it does make sense that they recorded in the studio because, yeah, as you said, is like, you know, kind of an organized mess, but the songs were more consistent. Like there wasn't the volume fluctuations from track to track that there were on the first album. Like things seemed more consistent. You know, what Devon was saying about them recording Hammered Drunk seems to make sense. You know, just going in. And, you know, there's always been the rumors too that Bathory, for Reporthon specifically, he supposedly like would one take all the stuff. They'd hit record. He would just play, finish. And then recording solos, it was like, yeah, I'm going to slap a solo in here. And then just slap a solo in there. I don't know. Like this
I believe
album,
that.
like,
I believe
the
that.
only songs that really jump out to me that I really, really like is Total Destruction. I do like Born for Burning and The Return of Darkness and Evil. That's probably actually my favorite song on this by
Yeah,
far.
that's a great song. Yeah, that's kind of, I believe, the song that kind of, even though it's an earlier track, I think it kind of hints at the next album. It's got, I think it's got it's pointing the way to you know, under the sign. Yeah, I like this album, but I think I actually prefer the debut a little bit more overall as far
Me
as
too.
listenability. And this one's about what, 35 or 37
It's like
minutes?
37 minutes.
Yeah. So again, it's compact, it's quick, it's to the point, it punches you in the face, punches you in the gut, kicks you in the nuts, kind of moves on. I like it. I mean, I like it. I don't love it, but I like it. And it's probably one that, given a few more spins, I might come around even higher on. I'd probably give this like a 7, 6.5 to 7 overall on the scale. So anybody else want to add anything else on this one? No? All right, cool. Devin, how about let me get that off there a minute. Yeah, I agree with you that it's mostly thrash. I think that the aesthetic of it, Frederick, is there's more of a black, like you said, black and thrash. I think if black and thrash would have been a term back then, that's what these albums would have been called. So, right. I need to change my picture here. All right, so.
Oh, yes.
Album number 3. And this is Under the Sign of the Black Mark. Came out in, wait, hold on. Got the wrong page here. This one
87.
came out. Yeah, I got the page here.
Is that one of the newer pressings?
May 11th. May 11th.
I have.
Doesn't say
Is that
what
what
year
you got?
this-
May 11th?
That's what it says on Metal Archives.
Yeah.
That's weird. Mine, is that what it says?
Yeah.
For some reason, I wrote down 1/1/87. Weird. Huh.
There's a picture of Elizabeth.
This was on Black Mark Productions. Where else here we? Again, Porthon and Boss did the the production, and I think this was at Heaven Shore as well. Jimmy, you want? I'll tell you what, Devin, why don't you start with this one?
So listening to this, honestly, this used to be my least favorite of the first 4, but now I've come to like this more than The Return. But this one, I would say it's definitely the closest to being pure black metal, but I still say, what's the one song? Into the Eternal Fires, where you could tell he was going to go do this next because it has that kind of like epic-y, like mid-pace kind of chanting style. And the bands that would come later, like the stuff in the 90s, what's the song? Equimantho, and that's definitely one of the fastest songs they ever did. And what's the other super fast one?
Massacre?
No, something of fire. I can't read what the fuck that
Chariots
says.
of Fire.
Chariots of
yeah.
Fire. Equimanothorn too is pretty thrashy.
Yeah, I know. I think like Satiricon's covered that, Doug Funeral, and some other bands. But yeah, But that being said, my favorite song is probably the opening track or Woman of Dark Desires.
Yeah. You mean Nocturnal Obsessions?
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty
Oh,
ominous shit.
oh, Woman of Dark Desires, probably that one.
How about you, Jim?
Yeah, I mean this to me is clearly the influence on all the Norwegian bands. This album, I mean, you can hear it right in what is it? I think it's Massacre. The first proper track.
Right.
I mean, Dark Throne lifted one of those riffs right out of there and put it on Under a Funeral Moon. I think it was. You know, I mean, it's and I think that was a intentional nod on their part to pay homage to Forthon and their everlasting love for this record, because I think the entire this is really, I mean, like if we want to talk like first wave like black metal, I mean, there's all these things that kind of like we were talking about, like all these bands that had a sort of like hint of sort of like, for example, Merciful Fate, King Diamond was doing the face paints, and that was kind of that part of their influence on what would be considered first wave black metal. This record is really first wave. I mean, this is really a black metal record, in my opinion. And I would probably rank it up there with, it's hard to say if this is my favorite. It's pretty close because I feel like every single song stands out. I feel like this is like the first album in the discography where I feel like everything like is not blending together as much. Like I feel like tracks stand apart a lot better. And like I don't know if he just nailed upon something here with this. Or
This is an entire cover album, bands covering Bathory songs.
Is that all?
That's a good compilation.
Marduk, Gehenna, Dark Funeral, Emperor, Lord Belial, The Abyss, Niflheim, Necrophobic, Sacramentum, Unanimated, Satyricon.
And is that all this record, Devon, or is that like all...
No, they're covering like the whole the whole songs in the whole discography. No, I have that somewhere packed away. Yeah. That's a great compilation.
And Conspiracy with Satan, Sacrifice, Reaper, Equimantho, Find It to Die, Massacre, Armageddon, Woman of Dark Desires, Dying Fire, Enter the Eternal Fire, Call from the Graves, 13 Candles, Raise the Dead, Born for Burning and War. So just pick those four.
No, the majority of those songs listed is from Under the Sign.
Under the Sign, yeah. And
I
rightfully so. That's what it was. I mean, I just wanted to wrap up in saying, I mean, it was. I don't know if he really just accomplished what he really sought out here was to create black metal, because really for me, this is the album that did it. I mean, and if you look at any early Norwegian bands, all the ones that Devon listed have something to take away from this album. And this is the first one that he really like kind of nailed the atmosphere as well. I mean, I thought that The Return had a certain atmosphere to it, but this one, they brought the keyboards, they brought the big bells. What are those called? The big
tubular bells,
chimes,
bells, or whatever. I mean, that really was effective in what is that? Enter the Eternal Fire. I mean, that is a classic black metal song, and maybe one of the first. And it's very clear what this record did. And I'm kind of sad to see that this is the last one in terms of what they were doing here, because I thought they did it very effectively here. I think Quorthon was a man that was always constantly trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And,
he was. Where did he belong? What was he trying to accomplish?
And that's why I kind of have a look. I don't know the full history of Quorthon or know his person, but my gut feeling, and I listen to this a lot, and my gut feeling is that he just nailed upon something that maybe he wasn't quite sure, because I don't know if this is where he really wanted to go with the band, so that's a really interesting thing, I think, Well,
I think Kevin said it a while back here. He said, let me see what the comment was, because it was a good comment.
And another point, maybe why he ditched it was because he maybe felt guilty because all the guys like burning churches were influenced by him mainly. So he's like, oh, fuck, this is kind of my fault.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, on this album, you hear things like blast beats. You hear more of the guitar is a little bit more where you want to hear it for black metal. Could you point? I would point to this album being the template, and being the influence that bands like Mayhem and Emperor and all those guys used, where they then took it to another level, and Corthon went a different direction soon with the next album, certainly with the album after that, he really went off in a total different direction. And I have this theory about Corthon. I think Corthon was kind of a prog dude that was a super metalhead that couldn't quite figure out how he wanted to incorporate those two spheres. Prog metal wasn't, prog metal was starting right around now. You had Watchtower, you had Fates Warning, you had Queensryche, but he wasn't quite going the prog metal route where it was wankery, because let's be honest, he's a good guitar player, but he's not a John Petrucci type guy. You know what I mean? He's not going to blast out shreddy, fucking sweep picking stuff without fucking up. There are times I hear him actually record and keep things in that are kind of fuck ups on the guitar. He's not that guy, but he still was looking to make these more expansive tracks. And I think, Enter the Eternal Fire is probably the first example of it, like the major example. Devon, what did you already talk about this one?
Yeah.
Tyler, give me your.
Well, Jimmy kind of pointed it out. So if the Return kind of set the standard for the aesthetic of what black metal is, then Under the Sign set the template for what the music should be.
That's it.
I mean, shit, man. I love every single track on this, even the intro, like top to bottom. Like, of the first three, this is far and away my favorite of the first trilogy. One with Dark Desires, that still has that. It still has that kind of Venom-ish, slow Motorhead-ish thing going on. Like, he still was carrying that influence through.
It's got a
Equimanthorn, though. Equimanthorn, that's straight tremolo riffing on that.
Oh, maybe it's not thrashy as fuck.
It's like fast thrash. It's like That's the kind of shit that like the German bands were getting known for, was that real high speed, fast picking. And to bring up your point, Corthon not being like a John Petrucci, super technical guy. I don't want to say he was like an autistic type musician, but I don't think he had to be. I don't think he was a dude that would sit down and woodshed for hours a day. I think he was just able to you know what? I'm going to fucking shit out an album. And then he would just pick up his guitar and shit out a fucking glorious album, and just.
Just so we're clear, I wasn't comparing those two. I was trying to say
I know what you're saying.
I was trying to say that I think in some ways he wanted to be that prog guy, but he was still constrained with the punk element of his upbringing and the Ace Frehley playing. Look, man, Kiss was my first huge band because I came from the 70s, and Ace was a god to me. Ace is not a good guitar player. He's an average guitar player at best, but something about his attitude was fucking cool as shit. And he and Alex Lifeson were the two guys that made me go pick up a guitar. Not Tony Iommi, Steve Howe a little bit. But, I'm a prog dude that can play guitar pretty decently, but I can't fucking rip out those sweet picks, man. I can do triads okay, but that's about it. I'm not I'm not an Yngwie. I'm not a fucking Tosin Abasi or one of these guys. I just can't play like that. It's patriotic. So what Kevin nailed it. He's a much more accomplished musician at this point on this album. And you can hear it in the compositions of the song. Much more variety on these songs. For me, Woman of Dark Desires even has a little bit of a new wave of British heavy metal vibe to it at times.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The synths are in there that the synths they're buried, but they bring a lot more to the compositions. Massacre's menacing buzzsaw, thrashy guitars, nasty vocals, bass and drums sound like ass, but really that's how they're supposed to sound. What's this one? Call from the Grave. Super creepy synth. Very almost fast doom. That's kind of like a fast doom song in a weird way.
Dude, I covered that song in Rubizol.
It's great
Playing
song.
live, that shit slaps live, dude. It's heavy as fuck.
Like you already said, Equimanthorn is super thrashy. Obviously, for me, the top track on here is pretty easy. It's Enter the Eternal Fire, because it's where I gravitate to with metal. It sounds in that song sounds almost more like traditional heavy metal. It's more of a, I don't know, it's just got that trad metal sound to it, and love it. What's the last one? Chariot's super fucking thrashy and punky. And then the last one I noted was 13 Candles. That's super drony and doomy.
Yeah.
And that's a great song. And yeah, I fucking love that song. Hypnotic, very hypnotic. So better overall sound writing, mix, and recording. Let's see, what do we got here? Guitars, not like Morbid Tales, less doomy, more speedy, but this one's like an 8.5 out of or a 9 for me. This is a great album.
So earlier you mentioned he was a prog fan. Apparently, before he died, he was teasing return back to black metal. Do you think he would have gone full enslaved, made like progressive black metal if he was still alive?
I don't know. Maybe because I did peek ahead and listen to a little bit of Nordland and Blood on Ice, and he was building to some pretty epic sounding shit. And the next, 3 albums prove that out. I don't know that he'd been enslaved. Like, I mean, I hear bits in Enslaved that remind me of Bathory. You know what I mean? There's all these guys. Listen, all these guys were incestuous. There's no way they couldn't be. They were hearing each other on locally. They were trading tapes and saying, "Hey, dude, man, check out my new demo." And they were listening to each other. And there's no doubt, man, when you listen to other people's music, you steal ideas. You just do. It's as a guitar player. There's, today I was noodling around a little bit because I hadn't played in a long time, and I'm like, oh shit, the Alex Lifeson comes out in me every time I play. I let chiming chords ring out and individual notes that hang and stuff like that. It's like, that's so Alex Lifeson right there. I don't know. That's a good question, Devin. It's one of those questions we'll never be able to answer.
And I also heard a rumor he was working on a trilogy called The Vikings.
Well, I think he, somewhere along the lines, I thought I heard somewhere where he had like 60 songs demoed that never even.
Yeah, I heard there's a bunch of songs that are unreleased, and apparently his dad died soon after, so no one could put them out.
Exactly. Like the rights to them are really difficult to know what's going on there. So, yeah, man, this is a killer album. And Devin, when we were talking initially, I was saying, yeah, Blood, Fire, and Ice is my favorite. Man, I don't know. This is like 1 and 1A with Blood, Fire, and Ice.
Blood, Fire, Death.
Blood, Fire, Death. Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's a hard
Blood on Ice.
Yeah,
this is really close. It's like 1 and 1A, and any day it could be different.
Yeah. I was going to note a couple other things. You were talking about like sort of half comparing him to like Patricia or like being maybe like a borderline prog guy. I think the biggest thing, like, because he obviously showed that he could play really good, but I think what this record showed was that his compositional skills had really, really gotten so much
big
better.
time.
And it really like foreshadowed what he was going to do next in terms of composition and writing, not so much being like this amazing, the guy could play guitar, obviously. I mean, there's nobody could doubt that, but it was
right. It
was the writing of the songs. And the other thing I noted was that there was a drummer. He had a different drummer on this one, right? Paul Lundberg, who I think only played on this record before he got the next guy. And I'd never really noted anything from his drumming. I feel like I want to go back and listen and try and pay a little more attention to the drumming because I didn't really.
Now the drumming's real straightforward.
Yeah,
there's nothing, and honestly, you could say that about any of the Bathory albums. And then obviously, when he started being completely solo and programming his own stuff, like the drums were never like a really complex focal point.
No,
like,
they weren't.
They're just the foundation that carry Quorthon's music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, throughout his career, the composition is more important as a whole than the individual play. And yes, I think the focus generally is on the guitars, which we're going to talk about on the next album, which really he levels up even further on this next album. So we ready to move on to the 4th album? Anything else to be said on Under the Sign?
Nope, just if it's not in your collection and you call yourself a black metal fan, then you're a poser.
Yeah, agreed. It's
And
All right,
there's one thing about this album I'll mention after that. Don't let me forget.
All right, Blood, Fire, and Ice, or Blood, Fire, and Ice. I keep saying Blood, Fire, and Ice. Blood, Fire,
Okay,
and Death.
since you keep saying Blood, Fire, Ice, Blood on Ice was actually recorded right after this, but it didn't come out till later because he felt it was too big of a transition.
Yep.
So he says, but who knows?
He was recording the same time as Hammerheart. He was recording both at the same time.
So this one came out on October 8th, 1988. Came out in Music for Nations. Was recorded on Heaven and Black Mark under one flag. Well, actually, it was Music for Nations under one flag is where it came out in Europe. Was recorded at Heaven Shore Studio, Stockholm. Black Mark Typhon in Europe. Q and Boss again producing. On this now, this is where we have the two band members with names that we don't know exactly who they all are. Voronth on drums and Cathar on bass. So could be a number of different guys, could be the same guys, who knows. With him, you just never quite knew. And there's an interesting little thing, and I think it came around the time of this album. He came over to the US to do a promotional tour, and he didn't want anybody to tell anybody that he was there. And the guy's like, well, how would, I love that picture of them with their swords and their fucking loincloths, man. Seriously, like too fucking funny. yeah, Manowar, big time. And actually, I hear a lot of Manowar on this. And I'm not a Manowar guy. How about we go with real quick? So Black and Thrash gives way to Viking metal. That was my kind of quote here. Tyler, you want to go ahead?
Oh yeah. So this is probably my favorite Bathory album.
Yep.
I mean, I go back and forth between this next trilogy. Like this, Hammerheart, Twilight are all depending on the mood. So yeah, obviously this is where people cite the influence for modern day Viking metal. But you know, if you didn't have that intro track, A Fine Day to Die or Blood, Fire, Death, this is a fucking slapping thrash album.
Yeah.
Every other track on here fucking hauls ass, and like he did not abandon those thrash roots on this at all, short of 2 songs. And a lot of people seem to, I don't know why, but when it comes up in discussions, they're like, oh, Blood, Fire, Death, that's Viking metal. And it's like, yeah, I could tell you only listened to, Fine Day to Die and the title track. You didn't listen to the rest of the album.
I agree with you 1,000,000%.
This has got some of his best absolute fast thrash bangers of his whole fucking discography. But people don't talk about it. And I'm like, why? Like, I mean, just compositionally, the performance, everything about it is top notch. But people, I mean, for obvious good reasons, people focus on the 2 bookend epics.
The 2 bookend epics, yep.
Yeah, so I mean,
but you're right. You're right 100%. This is what I wrote there was Black and Thrash gives way to. I wrote this album is pretty much a thrash album with 2 big epic, quote unquote, proggy Viking tracks. That's really what it is.
Oh yeah,
and those 2 tracks are killer. Don't get me wrong; they're killer tracks.
There's not a weak track on this fucking album, in my opinion. But when people talk about this album, they don't talk about the fact that short of 2 big songs, I mean, that's like 16, 17 minutes of the album that you take away with those 2 epics, but it's a slapping thrash album.
Yep.
By far. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, this probably had the biggest influence on me when I was younger, like as far as the Bathory albums go. Like me and my best friend, we wore copies of this album out. We listened to the shit out of this. This and Under the Sign, we probably listened to the most. But Blood, Fire, Death more so than Under the Sign.
Any specific tracks jump out at you other than the epics?
Oh, like
the whole album.
Golden Walls of Heaven and Holocaust, man. Both those songs are just absolutely amazing. And I really like For All Those Who Die. I like that groove on that. And it's just, that'd be a fun song to cover, I think. Because, I mean, it just slams. Like, there's nothing complex about it, but it's got a real heavy groove to it that I really, really, really like. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, Golden Walls of Heaven, Pace Till Death, Holocaust, I mean, they're all Equimanthorn-like tracks, except better. Like, tighter, faster.
So, yeah, I mean, like the triumvirate of Holocaust for those who died, dies
Yeah,
Irae, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, all right. All three of those are just thrashers, man. They're just fucking thrashers, like all out thrashers. And then you got, like you said, Golden Walls of Death is like that as well. The Pace Till Death, the little Ring Around the Rosie riff at the beginning.
Da, 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 da.
Man, that is the most
Yeah.
cringy fucking moment in metal. I swear to God. I forgot about it, and as soon as it came up, I'm like, oh, why, dude? What the
I
fuck
laugh
were
for a
you?
minute, and then the song gets going, and I quickly forget about it. It's like,
Well, I forget
oh,
it. You
that's
forget
hilarious,
it.
but
You forget it because it gets into hyperspeed thrash after that. But boy, the beginning of that is you're like,
But
oh man.
there again, that kind of plays into what I've read. The rumor mill that he improvised a lot of stuff, and they would hit the record button in the studio, and he would just like, he would just wing some shit, and that was obviously something he probably winged.
Yeah,
and
for
probably
me,
didn't expect it to be a final take.
for me, this is like an 8.5 out of 10, and was my favorite until I immersed myself a little bit more in Black Mark, or Under the Sign. This, that opening, Odin rides out to Nordland. Holy fucking shit! I mean, is there a more goosebump inducing moment in fucking metal than that? I just don't. I'm sure there are.
Like the horses galloping, you could tell it's like stuff like you'd see like in the sky. It's just like, what
Well,
the
it
fuck?
almost feels like
it's
you're
the cover. Like
it
Exactly.
is the cover, right?
It's the cover.
But seriously, if you have a good set of headphones and you got that on, it feels like you're laying on the ground and they're going right over top of you, and it's just so cool the way that's my singular moment with
Oh
Bathory.
man.
I just love that going into A Fine Day to Die, just so fucking epic and killer. And then Blood, Fire, Death, man, that song rules all fucking. It just is so goddamn good, man. Oh, the riffs are incredible. It's anthemic. It's got some trad metal in it. Devon, I know this is your favorite albums. Go ahead and let it roll.
Is it though? Let me see. I only have the record, a flag behind me, and the long sleeves. So no, I think it sucks.
I was like, I was looking at that flag. I was like, I'm mad jealous of that flag, dude.
That flag's killer.
I need that for my room.
Favorite song? Yeah, the whole album. I'm not choosing, but if I had to, probably Pace Till Death or the Golden Walls of Heaven. But whole album's great though. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of odd. It's not really Viking metal besides the two songs. It's basically black and thrash, but I don't know why people call it a full-on Viking album. But
It's not.
no,
I don't think it's Viking. I mean, you could
the two
almost
songs, yeah, but besides that, no.
But you could almost argue those two songs are Manowarish. You could also argue that they're proggy. They're, okay, they're singing about I guess the thematic material makes them more the Viking songs, the thematic stuff that they're talking about. But those two epic long tracks could fit into a number of different genre boxes. And what they really show is that what Jimmy said about Under the Sign, he's leveled up on this album. He's leveled up to the next level.
There's some awesome solos on this too.
And that's the other thing.
Which solos in black metal isn't really a thing, but man, there's some ripping solos on this one.
Hang on, start over, because what'd you say there, Tyler?
I was saying Golden Walls of Heaven, it's like a 5-minute banger, but like 2.5 minutes of it is raging solos.
That solo. Yeah, that solo's killer.
All the solos. There's tons of solos on it, and they're all awesome.
Trying to remember. No, that's not the one I had the note on. Jimmy, what's your impression of this one here? I gotta believe you like this one.
Oh yeah, I think we're all pretty much in agreement. I mean, for me, this has always been his finest moment out of everything he's done, and maybe I've changed my mind a little bit because Under the Sign has really creeped up a lot for me. But what I love about this album is like the versatility of it, like the I love it so much when a band can like do a bunch of different stuff in a record. And it's not that it's a long record, but it's just got a lot of variety, and I love that, man. I mean, it's a transitional record to what they were going to go on to next. and I really dig that. You know, those two songs that sort of kind of show what he was going to do with the sort of Viking era, you know, Viking metal, if you want to call it that. It's I guess a Find Day to Die and Blood, Fire, Death are really kind of, I would very much say that to me sounds like Viking metal. But it's like the rest of it, like Tyler said, it's like this thrash banger fest, you know, that like the drums, the guy that you got playing drums is holy so much better, you know.
Oh,
now I'm taking the drumming on the record, but I mean, Holocaust, that's one of the finest speed thrash metal songs I've ever heard, bar none. I'd put that above most of Slayer, you know. I mean, because it's so, I mean, it just, every time I hear it, it just gets me going, man. It just, the goosebumps like crazy. Compositionally, I mean, the solos, I mean, he stepped everything up at this point. And I find it so interesting at this point in the discography, just how different everything has been, you know, and like how he's been, you know, you've talked about like how he had Blood on Ice kind of on ice, and then he did this, and it was kind of like, that was, you know, that's really interesting because that wouldn't come out for another 3 records, but
right.
that would kind of go where we're going to go from here. But I had to pull the CD just because this is funny, and I just wanted to show you guys. I think this is I wonder if you have the same one, Tyler, but this is the Craze manufacturer. I don't know, man,
Yeah.
but is that what you got? So let me show
the
you.
one. Yeah.
That's the one you got. Yeah. Okay. So let me show you how much love and care that they gave this beautiful pressing. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh,
Jesus
yours is
Christ.
black. Mine's white.
Oh, at least you got. Hey, you know they probably did 50 white and 100 black. So man,
Well,
I mean, so
look at this shit. Like they didn't even trim it right. I mean, there's like a white bar.
Ah,
yeah,
jeez.
it's nothing. It's all pixelated. So this, and it's funny because I thought maybe I had picked up a bootleg. I bought this at a record store up in Denver, but it was sealed.
Well,
So I figured it was
ironically
official
enough, this version of it came out before the Black Mark release. This
Did it
came out in
really?
1990. The Black Mark release came out in 93.
Well, that's probably the one to get then, because this is like piss poor. And yes,
What is the edition? Who issued it?
this is Craze manufactured.
Yeah, it's some little rinky-dink U.S. distro.
Yeah,
I think this is like the only thing they released.
Wow.
yeah.
Weird.
Again, man, bar none, dude. This is for me. Yeah,
But they came out.
I'd go as
But
far
they
as to
both.
say-
Oh, no, never mind. They released a bunch of shit. It's a New York label.
Did they? Mhm.
They both came out before he died, though, right?
Look, Thrash says the Craze issues are boots. Interesting. Yeah. Well,
Who said that?
Thrash would be thrashed in the chat. Well, I mean, I'm not
Really?
surprised it was off that way.
I'm not surprised either, but fuck it, still sounds killer. Like I've had it forever. Like that's
Yeah,
what my
I think-
store had.
I need to upgrade to the one Devon's got, but yeah, it's fucking great.
By the way, just so you guys know, Devon declared it here on the stream. He's getting a tramp stamp of Bathory on his back of his ass. Sadly for you, Devon, none of us really want to see it. So just keep it to yourself.
I don't
And-
know. I mean, it depends on what it is. You know, is it the logo or is it Quorthon's?
It's Quorthon going.
Yeah, and you can get one of those like fucking ground sheets for your waist. You can just flip it up and show everybody.
And you mentioned Slayer earlier. I think it's Golden Walls of Heaven where the music stops. He speaks really fast. That's basically what they did in the Hell Awaits. That's part where they like scream really fast and the music stops on Hell Awaits. He's still up from Slayer. And then the riff continues again. That's from Hell Awaits.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, but I'll tell you what, this is a killer album, man. It really is. I think sonically too, it's better. The production is quite a step up, even over Under the Sign. And this, like I said, is an 8.5, probably a 9 on any given day. Both this and Under the Sign are, if somebody came to me and said what would be the first Bathory to try out, I would probably say one of those two. Probably this one
Yeah.
would be the one I would say to start with, and then go, work your way back. Because like all of us, if you start with the first Bathory and you're not thinking that way and knowing what to expect, you might be like, nothing real exceptional here. I'm gonna move on. But speaking of moving on, let's kind of move on
So
to
real quick, Jeff.
oh yeah,
Before you move on,
yeah.
the one thing that popped in my head is weird is that because you guys were talking about how Blood on Ice was already written and ready to go. I found that really interesting because the two, epic tracks on this, they sound to me like they would have been written way before that, because it wasn't like, it didn't feel like it was quite developed to that point. So I just find that interesting, and I wonder if he had those.
He talks about it. If you have the CD version of Blood on Ice, the booklet that comes with it is, it barely fits in the case. And obviously we'll get to that album down the road, but he talks about that whole thing. He talks about, and he actually ended up re-recording a lot of that album. Like, he came across the demo tracks, and then he was like, "Hey, I can make something of this," and he re-recorded a lot of it. But it was written in between, during Bloodfire Death, and then a chunk of it was written as he was recording Hammerheart, and then he scrapped it or shelved it or whatever. Forgot it. Literally, he says in the thing he forgot about it until he's digging through old tapes, and he was like, "Oh, what's this?" And then he went back and kind of dug up his old demo tracks.
Yeah, it didn't come out till 96.
Which he was already dead, right?
No, he didn't die 2004.
He died in 04, not 94. I was thinking he died in 94.
Yeah, he saw the releases of the two Nordland albums, and he was working on Nordland 3 or he had demo tracks of Nordland 3 when he had his heart attack.
So Rick only plays the first Bathory in the family living room listening Fun Time. Seeing as how his kid doesn't live with him anymore, and no, you live with, that's right, you live with a couple of people now, so that'd be an interesting thing. I think you should videotape that, Rick, for your next video for YouTube. Put that album on unexpectedly, like with all your brothers-in-laws and sister-in-laws and their kids and family sitting around, and just see what they think when they hear Golden Walls of Death. So, all right, let's move on to the fifth album. And you had this one, dude? Yeah, okay, hang on. Let me get rid of Rick's comment. There we go. So this one is Hammerheart. This came out, again, Heaven Shore Studios, came out April 16th, 1990, Black Mark Productions. Corthon and Boss doing the producing on it. He had his first music vid off this, which is One Road to Asa Bay. And this is quote unquote where I guess I would say the Viking metal thing takes full flight here. And I'm going to go last on this because I have a lot of opinions about this that may or may not be contrary to, I don't know. Devon, you've said you listened to it today. You said you hadn't listened to it in a while. So why don't you tell me what you think about it?
Corthon, you were doing so well. This is like one of my least favorites he ever did, but I don't know to me. There's only really two songs I like: "Baptized in Fire and Ice" and "One Road to Asa Bay." The rest of the album is kind of not memorable. It's kind of like super mid-paced and slow. A lot of the songs just kind of sound the same, but it's an okay record. But he's definitely capable of doing better, which he did quickly after this. He got a lot better, and his vocals, Corthon, you couldn't sing. I don't know why he was trying to attempt to sing this stuff, but not bad. It's slightly overrated, but oh well.
Any one favorite song on it?
"Baptized in Fire and Ice" and "One Road to Asa Bay." It would have been good as an EP with those two and throw the rest out the window. Out of 10, this is like a 5.5 for me, honestly.
So, Tyler, I have a feeling you're going to feel differently about that.
Yeah. So, admittedly, it took me a while to, as I mentioned before, like this, it's not really one of the last albums. Well, it might be one of the last albums I actually picked up. Because I obviously had heard One Road to Asa Bay, and I really liked that track. And then my buddy got it, and I was listening to it, and it's like, it's okay. Like, I kind of had a similar opinion as Devon, like years and years ago. I felt that Twilight was a stronger album, but we'll get into that here in a little while. But I don't know. I shelved the album for a few years, and then a few years ago, just as I was kind of getting into the Rubizol thing, I started listening to it again, and man, it hit a lot harder. It hit a lot differently, and it's actually, like I mentioned before, with the with Bloodfire Death, like this and Hammerheart are probably, or Bloodfire Death and Hammerheart are probably my two favorite albums, along with Twilight. Like this trilogy, the Viking trilogy, as they call it. But I like the direction that he went on this. And yeah, his vocals were goofy, but as he showed on Blood on Ice and Nordland, like singing wasn't really a problem for him. I think he was purposely singing that way because I don't think he wanted to fully abandon his previous fans, but by going my full clean vocals, he wanted to have that kind of just, I don't know what was going through his head. And like, no, I'm with Devon. Like when I first heard those vocals, I was like, what the fuck? And then after a while it grew on me, and I feel like it fits the music better than say his vocals on Bloodfire Death would have, in my opinion. Like he was going for that epic sound, and he wanted to have like a more, I don't know, epic vocal thing for it. But no, I like the pacing on this album. I think Homer Once Brave is one of his most powerful songs. If you really pay attention to the lyrics on it, like that song hits hard, and it's about when you really dig deep into the lyrics on that, it's just someone lamenting about watching his homeland kind of, turning into something different, turning into something not good. Like how just make a long story short, that the Homer Once Brave it's kind of his lamentation for like the youth of Sweden forgetting about their roots of their homeland. And like when you really pay attention to lyrics and like listen to me, you're like, holy shit, that song it cuts deep. But like I said, I think the only song I don't like on it is Song to Haul Up High, because that real nasally vocal tone of his like does not do that song justice, and it does get annoying. I do kind of skip that track, but all the other songs on it I listen to top to bottom. I have no issues with it. And yeah, Valhalla, Homer Once Brave, and One Radassa Bay are definitely the three favorites on this album. But I don't know. Like I said, I think it just took me growing up and getting older and putting different ears on this album, and it just hit different. Like I don't know a better way to explain it than that.
I'm gonna have something to say about the growing older and all that stuff. So we'll get to that, but I'm gonna go to Jimmy first. Jimmy, what do you got to say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I'll tell you right off the bat that I'm not the biggest fan of the Viking era of Bathory. I think this might have been the first album I ever heard. And I always wondered, knowing like what we've gotten through already, the first four records, like what people thought at the time when it came out, like, because it's such a huge, I mean, you can kind of see it, what he was hinting at with those songs on the last one. But man, I mean, like it was like almost like fully realized in this, and it kind of like makes sense to me because this is what he really wanted to work towards. But I mean, we could all talk about the vocals, and I think like I find it interesting hearing Tyler talk about whether it was intentional or whether he just kind of just winged it and did the best he could. And I listened to the record a lot thinking, would I enjoy this more if he would have found another vocalist that would have been a little bit better? Because I'll say that like I know that this is considered Viking metal, and to me like it just sounds more just like epic heavy metal.
Exactly.
And epic heavy metal is usually not something that I usually go for. So that's just me. And I certainly don't want to like diminish the enjoyment that anybody has, because I know this record is highly, revered. when you read about it. I know a lot of people that love this stuff. And I like the music. I think compositionally, like I think he was really had a focus on that. And I think to really enjoy this album, I think Tyler kind of hit it, and I think the lyrics and the concept of is supposed to really be a big part of that. It's not the type of album that you can just put on and instantly gravitate towards, because I mean, let's be real. I mean, the vocals are pretty awful in a lot of spots. I mean, at least it sounds that way to me. Like, and I don't want to shit on him at all. I started to think about, like what bands do I like where, there's vocals like that people either you love it or you hate it. Like for example, King Diamond, right? I mean, people, you either love or hate King Diamond's vocals. You're not really anywhere in the middle. I love King Diamond's vocals. Same with Geddy Lee. I love Geddy Lee's vocals. A lot of people cannot stand his vocals, think it is the worst sound they've ever heard, I'll even go and say Mastodon, for example. I mean, terrible, I'm not trying to compare Bathory to Mastodon or vice versa, but most people did not like Mastodon because of the vocals. And I'm talking like the early era before
the early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I like those vocals, and I realized the reason why I like them is because it fit with that sort of like concept of that band Mastodon, where it's like, it's supposed to be like, a primal beast kind of thing. So it kind of, to me, it like fit in with that sort of feeling. And I just liked it, even if the vocals were awful. And I think that this record has a similar thing, like, because I think the guy's pouring his heart out in what he's trying to do.
That's a good way to look at it.
It's not, I mean, whether it sounds really good to your ears or you're willing to just say like, it sounds to me like he's pouring his heart out. That's what I get out of this. I get that, and that makes sense to me. And that's I think what it takes to enjoy what he's doing here. But I think, I feel like we're getting off to a little bit of a rocky start because I think he gets a lot better doing what he's doing here, because I mean, this is a big change, and it's a lot to throw at the listener, because you could tell like he put a lot of work into, the layering and the compositional aspect of it, because we're not doing, speed metal or anything like that anymore.
Yeah, he's left a lot of the black and thrash behind now.
Yeah, I mean, this is anthemic, this is a whole different beast, and so for me, like, I listen to it a lot, and I think as I've gotten older now, I can definitely appreciate it more, even though I don't love it. And it's not something that I would opt. If I'm going to go listen to Bathory, this isn't going to be the one that I reach for. But I can say that I have a very spent appreciation for this album, and where he would go with this, even if, and also recognizing, like I said, that this sort of sound isn't really for me, so like,
yeah,
I'm not one to like shit on it or say it's amazing, because it's like saying, you're listening to something that you normally don't go for, right? So
right.
So yeah, it's a weird one. I always just find it interesting when because I think I appreciate hearing people that have really spent the time with it and really enjoy the album to explain to me, like Tyler just did, like what when you go look at some of these reviews and it's like 100%, 10 out of 10. This is like the most amazing record that I've ever heard in my life. And it's like, okay, like, let's not be hasty here. Can you like really expand on why you think that? Because I'm, I can totally appreciate that, but I don't want to, I'd much rather give this the time that it deserves and not be so like, and be respectful of the man and his legacy without having to go, just, oh, if you don't like this, you don't fucking like metal or something, So, yeah, it's a weird one, man.
Yeah, Frederick Black.
And also, real quick, Jeff, it's interesting too, because like, and I should say this now since we're getting into the Viking stuff, is that like, I think the only bands that I really dig that have a sort of Viking aesthetic maybe is like Enslaved or Borknagar or Moon Sorrow. I mean, I don't really like a whole lot, like, I don't know if there's like just straight up Viking metal bands I could say that, maybe there's some that I'm just not aware of or I'm not thinking of, but it's like, I just always found it interesting. I mean, obviously the concept and the vocals and everything. But this is an epic heavy metal record to me. It's like, I find weird.
if I might interrupt just for a sec to maybe jump on that train of thought, the whole Viking metal thing, I'm not sure I understand what it is other than the conceptual stuff they're talking about. And yeah, there might be some Norse folky influences. You have some of the Norse traditional folk stuff that might creep in, which you hear a little bit like on like the song on Frosted I don't really like, Return to Yggdrasil. Remember we talked about that?
It's just called Yggdrasil.
Or Yggdrasil, right.
Yggdrasil, yeah.
What? No, but they did return to Yggdrasil, didn't they? Later, was that on the later album?
That was on Issa, yeah.
Issa, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
A totally different beast of a song.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I love that. I love that song. I love that one on Issa. But I agree with Jimmy that Viking metal, it's just another way to categorize, but it was epic metal, epic traditional metal, and there's no way, once again, that Quorthon wasn't checking out Manowar because
He claims he wasn't though, but he claims he wasn't a fan, but I don't believe that.
Well, he
He
might not.
also claimed he wasn't a fan of Venom, but we all know that's bullshit.
We claimed he didn't even know of Venom. Yeah, I mean, there's no way that he wasn't listening to Manowar. And Jimmy, like you, I'm not a massive fan of the genre. I struggle with Manowar because of all the super alpha male. I'm grabbing my battle axe and grabbing my woman, my bare-breasted woman, while I rape her and pillage and the fucking, if you've ever seen interviews with Joey DeMeo or whatever his name is,
Dude, he's
just
a
like
fucking cockbag, dude.
what a douchebag, what a true douchebag.
But I have all their fucking albums.
What a New York, New Jersey douchebag. But I'm sure he could kick my ass though. But I just never got into them. But it's like there's no way that Quorthon didn't sort of have that influence creep in somewhere somehow. There's no way. So for me, man, I was really, Devon and I have had this conversation over the last 2 years a couple of times. He'd be like, do you know this album by Bathory? And I'd be like, yeah, I know it, but it's been years since I've listened to it. Well, how much Bathory do you own? Okay, here comes the poser moment. Are you ready? I don't own any Bathory albums. And I think here's why I think, but I will, well, with my health, it's hard to say what I'll do, but here's the thing. I now remember dipping in and out of the Bathory, dipping my foot in and out of the Bathory pool throughout the years. And I remember checking this album out when it came out. And man, those vocals, holy fucking shit. It's like, dude, get a fucking real vocalist and this shit would rip. I get your points that, he had conviction behind it and he wrote a lot of complex lyrical themes going into the Viking material, but he sucks. It's that simple. The guy cannot fucking even carry pitch in some songs. Some songs he's literally going out of pitch in the song as he's singing the lyric, and you're like, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
Oh, wait till you get to Octagon. You'll be in a surprise.
But like, who in the fuck told you that sounded good when you were in the studio? Like, who? Your dad? Oh, that's it. Your dad did. Okay.
Nobody, because he was in the studio by himself.
It was all him. He was doing it himself. Exactly. The music. Let me read off some notes quick. Vocals generally are difficult to get into. I can't read what I said there. I'd forgotten why I hadn't actually bought any Bathory. Now I know why. This was an early listen for me, and I forgot how much his voice was a struggle for me to get into. Shores and Flames. Music is great, epic, huge. Vocals suck. Valhalla, good. What's it? Christ, I can't even. Good tune that at times tries to exceed its grasp in terms of complexity. Again, vocals blow. He has trouble trying to be melodic when he's singing, and that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to be melodic. And, this guy did a great death metal / black metal snarl, but man, he just could not sing on this album. He does get a little better, I'll admit that, But for me, the vocals on this are a 3 out of 10. He never really gets beyond a 5 out of 10 so far. He might get later down the road. I kind of remember Nordland being better. So we'll see when we get there. I didn't jump ahead. What else do I have here? Oh, here's one. From Father to Son. Where's Jimmy at? I wanted Jimmy to hear this a minute. Okay, you guys know Father to Son?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do the very beginning of that song. How's it start? Dun 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 dun. What song is that?
Oh,
Is that Metallica?
Nope. It is straight ripped off from Tribal Convictions from Voivod. Dimension Atros. Listen to it. It's the same fucking rhythm. It's exactly
All right,
the same.
yeah. Mhm.
But it's that one's okay. What's the other one? Song to what's that song to God? What?
song to Haul Up High.
Yeah, that one has a nice acoustic. A lot of that's the other thing. He starts adding a lot more acoustics on this album. He had them on Blood, Fire, Death, but he adds a lot more acoustic, and some of it's very interesting acoustic work. It's pretty cool stuff. That one's decent, but it gets a little monotonous. And what's it? The Home of Once Brave. The riffs are really cool. Vocals, ugh. One Road to Asabe, the major epic that was issued as a single with video, solid track, but the vocals again make it a slog for me. Too many plodding long songs that get repetitive. I gotta be honest with you guys. 7 out of 10 on the music, 3 out of 10 on the vocals. I struggled through this one bad. And then I was like, oh fuck. Is it gonna be as bad? I hit Devon up. I'm like, man, dude, is Twilight as bad? And he's like, it gets better. It gets better. Not a lot better, but it gets better.
Have you heard his alternative rock / grunge band he was in?
Yeah, Kevin
Called
says.
Quorthon.
Yeah,
Quorthon? No, what was it called?
Quorthon.
Yeah,
that was
was that
he
one
did
album?
two albums in
Oh,
between
two.
Blood on Ice and Destroyer. They was
Is that the one that he did about
90,
hockey?
94,
No,
97.
the song about hockey is on Destroyer of Worlds.
Okay, that's later coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me hit a couple of Man of War steroids. Dealing with it. It's more the folklore. Yeah, exactly. It's more the folklore and feel. Viking metal, not my fave. Yeah, it's Hammerheart. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. Of course, everybody listened to Voivod that was into metal back there. Anybody that was cool listened to Voivod. Yeah, I struggle with that. Struggle with that one, man. And I don't know that I'd go back to that. I don't really know that I'd go back down because the vocals on it are rough. Anyone want to add anything more on Hammerheart? I get the importance. I get the historical importance. I do contend, like Jimmy, that is it really Viking metal or is it more just traditional epic metal? I kind of think it's more
Like a
traditional
more
epic.
atmospheric, drawn out Man of War.
Kinda. With, let's admit it, at least the vocalists in Man of War are competent. I mean,
Well, the
Eric
other thing about that
Adams-
too is I mean, like the Viking metal thing. I mean, I know there's bands that are considered like Viking metal, but I feel like the ones that I know are kind of just like have that sort of like influence on it, but it's not like is
Well,
there
look at-
truly like people say like this is what birthed Viking metal? It's like, is there really that huge of a subgenre of Viking metal? Maybe there is, and I just don't.
I don't know about. If there is, I don't know about. Like you say Viking metal to me, what's the first band that comes to mind? For me, it's Amon Amarth, but they're really a death metal, mellow
Yeah,
death
they're really
band.
a death metal band. I mean, they
Yeah.
got the Viking metal, yeah.
But all their imagery and lyrics are about Vikings.
It'd be like
Well,
calling Nile Egyptian metal.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah, and how many bands
That's the
are
thing
in
with
that?
that
Sorry.
Viking metal tag, because like you said, Amon Amarth, and then you have bands like back in the late 90s, early 2000s, like Mythoton. It was a straight up black metal band, but they were still called Viking metal because everything was about Viking shit. But it was
See, that's what I think it is. I think it's
So
more about
it's
the
just a thematic
subject
thing.
matter, the
Yeah.
thematic stuff. Yeah. You just brought up. What'd you just bring up, Devin? I'm sorry. You just fuck. I lost it.
Nile.
The band,
People call it
Nile.
Nile Egyptian metal because they sing
right,
about
and
fucking Egypt.
right, Right, and how many Egyptian metal bands are there out there? One.
Right. They're
Nile.
not saying Nile birthed the Egyptian metal sound, and
Well,
the birth of Egyptian metal.
but you know what? They did because they sing all about fucking Egyptian.
Well, right, but it's not like there's a whole genre of
No.
Egyptian metal bands or anything.
But here's the thing. Nile are a fucking death metal band with the one thing that they add is they use a lot of exotic scales. So they use a lot of chromatic, weird exotic scales that are more Middle Eastern sounding. But there's, I mean, again, what is Viking? Well, true Viking music was probably folky, acoustic instruments, maybe skin drum heads with, animal skins. What was real Viking? To me, Viking music probably is a lot of chanting stuff. Like
Banging
almost
on
like
human skulls.
human skulls, right? Exactly, of their raped and pillaged, villagers. But yeah, I don't know. The whole Viking metal thing always kind of makes me quizzical
Well, and
as to
that was the
what
whole
that
point.
is.
I guess I get kind of goofy with it because, like, I mean, no doubt, Corthon was an innovator. I mean, you can't take that away from him. But it's just it's funny when you see people get really crazy about, well, he was the innovator in this too, and it's like, yeah, kind of, but it's just interesting to kind of see how people like kind of describe that when it's like, if you look at it.
But here's the thing, actually, Jimmy, I was just, and I see Bathory's number 1, Amon Amarth's number 2, and Enslaved number 3. And I don't really think any of those bands are that. Borgnagar's in there, Windir, Moon Sorrow, Wintersorg, Equilibrium, Campfire.
Like all those bands have like elements.
Yeah. The majority of those bands don't strictly sing about Viking shit, though.
Right.
Like Borknagar dropped it after the Old Domain, really.
I'm sure that what's the Burzum's even in here. So, to me, you're just further delineating more. You're peeling more skin off the onion to make another subgenre out of metal or death metal or black metal. And you just brought up, the innovator that Corthon was. I think he was an innovator, but I think he was also a very, very good plagiarist.
Copycat.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very good plagiarist. He plagiarized a lot of stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of bands that do that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of bands. Like, for example, here's a really good one. I just saw some pictures of the new or the most recent Rammstein set. It's fucking out of this world. It's so fucking insane. But who was the first people that were doing all the fire and the crazy shit on stage?
Kiss.
It was Kiss. They pretty much started that shit in the 70s. And they still do it. Although they're not, quite frankly, on Rammstein's level. Rammstein takes flames and gas pyro to a whole different level.
And the giant riding penis the guy rides, but...
Oh, yeah, that's fucking weird as hell. But
and sodomizing their keyboard player.
So, let's move. Are we ready to move on? Anyone want to say
real quick,
more about?
I mean, I think one thing about that is that it's interesting, because like there is a difference between like straight plagiarism and just like, bringing in influence to your band or your music, right? So maybe Corthon wasn't very good about just being honest about, well, I was influenced by these bands and I kind of pulled these in, right?
Right.
Because that's just the way, music's going to develop,
Well,
I mean,
and if you're in a rock star with an ego, you want to think that you probably created something different. I'm not saying he stole exact riffs, although...
No, he didn't. Born for Burning, I'll say it. That's Don't Burn the Witch.
Well, I was going to say, if anything, like if he did, at least Darkthrone took his riffs and put it on their record.
Exactly.
And they kind of took it to a new place too, so it was
exactly.
Kind of like, that's just the way it
and
goes.
you could argue that Hordane's Land and Viking Ligerveldi stole a little bit of the middle Bloodfire Death era stuff. You know what I mean? It's there. 94 was when Viking Ligerveldi came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
93, 94, yeah.
So Bloodfire Death's already out, and so is Under the Sun of the Black Mark. And you can definitely hear how that influenced. Look, man, as I said, I just sat here earlier tonight, was goofing around on my guitar, and right away I'm like, oh, That's Alex Lifeson. And then what did I do? I moved into playing Farewell to Kings because what I was playing was basically Farewell to Kings. And it's like, oh yeah, that's where I got that. I got that from Farewell to Kings. Nice. You can't. There's only 12 notes. You can't fucking reinvent the wheel, unless you're
Mhm.
Alan. Unless you're Alan. Alan. Oh, correct. Holdsworth. Thank you. Yeah. Which you start playing like nobody else in the world plays like. But anyway, I mean, yeah. So I didn't mean that as a derogatory way of explaining Chorthon, because I can tell you from the progression from the first two albums to the two that we're talking about now, and Bloodfire Death, and man, it's light years. It's fucking light years. His playing, his compositional skills, they just exploded. You can tell this dude was, Tyler, you said, I think you put it best. This dude wasn't sitting down woodshedding, although I think he probably did enough to get better.
Oh.
But what he really was doing was he was writing songs, and
Yeah,
he was
he wasn't doing mundane exercises for hours on
right.
end.
He was
He's
writing
writing riffs.
songs, exactly,
Yeah,
riffs and songs and lyrical approaches to those songs, and so it's pretty impressive. And then we get to this last one we're going to talk about tonight, which now I'm kind of fired up. I wish we would have done the whole catalog, because I could have just kept going tonight. But so this one comes out in sorry.
Yeah, and then after this, he made another left turn for 2 albums, but we'll get to that.
So this came out June 29, 1991. Boss and Q again on production. This was the one in Montezuma Studios in Sweden. Twilight of the Gods. I think this came out on Black Mark Gramophone or Typhon, but I guess probably is that what it says on there? Well, I know all the reissues came from Black Mark.
Produced by Boss. Let me check Discogs, see what the OG is.
I'm thinking that's what it was. On this album, am I wrong about this? I read somewhere that he plays everything on this album, but Devin, you told me that's not the case.
No, he didn't play everything till Destroyer of Worlds and both Nordland albums.
Okay, I don't know why.
But who knows?
I don't know where I saw that. I don't know why I saw that.
Yeah, the
no, this
OG.
is the last album that had a full listed lineup.
Yeah, the
Which one was?
OG. Yeah. This one?
Yeah, this
so-
one.
Yeah. Tyler.
I was saying this is the last one that had a full acknowledged lineup. Everything
Okay,
after this was solo.
But if you look up the Wikipedia thing, somebody got it wrong in there, because they said it was just him, that he played everything on this one. So
That
who
could be the
knows?
case for a lot of these albums, though.
Well, very true. He might have played everything. Who knows? Or programmed drums and
It could be all pictures of him in slightly different outfits. Who knows?
Well, that'd be a little bit trickier there. Who wants to go first on this one? Jimmy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think this one is I think it's definitely an improvement on Hammerheart for me.
Yeah.
It's weird because in a lot of ways, and I listened to these back to back quite a bit the last few days, and it almost kind of feels like there's a lot of really similar themes, similar melodic passages,
Ideas.
similar, a lot of different. It's almost like he kind of. I don't want to say this. I mean, this is just what I got from listening to it, but it almost felt to me like he kind of took Hammerheart and just kind of made it better. Like a lot of the melodies, a lot of the feeling, the tempo, the drumming, the brooding kind of feeling of the song just feels to me very similar to Hammerheart, just a little bit better, a little bit more expanded compositionally, quite better. And I like it a lot better too. I don't want to say that the vocals are, 100% better. I think they're a little better on here.
They're a little better. Yep. Agreed.
I think they're still, whether, it was intentionally for him to sing this way, or to make it sound like that, or he just got a little bit better. I'm not really sure. But But I do like this one a lot more. And if I was going to choose one, I would definitely go with Twilight of the Gods over Hammerheart. The first track, the big epic opener, which is like a 3-parter. It's like
Right.
Twilight of the Gods, the title track. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in here dynamically. Just like with acoustics and. I love that little bass twinge that happens in the middle. That bass part, it just comes like out of nowhere. It's just like this shreddy bass part. And then it goes back into the song. It's a little weird and kind of like out of left field, but I don't know, for some reason it works. But for the most part, it's a little bit more the same for me compared to Hammerheart. But I do like it. I think he really kind of stepped it up. It just sounds better. But then we kind of get further into it, and then the vocals start to kind of ruin it for me again. And I gotta say, and I wonder, I hear a lot of Bon Jovi in this record.
Really?
I'm
Well, that I
telling
didn't hear.
Look, Under the
where?
Ruins, and I think To Enter the Mountain. I swear to God, there's a bunch of shit in there that sounds just like. What's the song? What's the Young Gun song? The Bon Jovi.
Oh, Shot Down, Blaze of Glory.
Yeah, Live and Let. No, is it Live and Let Die? No, that's Guns N' Roses.
Shot down,
Yeah,
in
and
a
the
blaze of glory.
Yeah, for the Young Guns movie.
What's
Take
the name of
me
that fucking
down.
song?
Off
Well,
of a Bon Jovi album?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that song. That's the one. Yeah,
It's-
I mean,
Oh,
His
I thought
solo
you were.
stuff.
I thought you were thinking of "Shot Through the Heart."
no, not that. No, it's fucking. Shit. That's it. That's the song. You just sang it. It's the Young Guns song.
Yeah, Blaze of Glory.
Blaze of
from
Blaze
Glory.
of Glory. Yeah,
from
Blaze
Young
of Glory.
Guns.
I swear to God, go listen to Under the Ruins and tell me that that's not fucking Blaze of Glory, dude.
All right, so I'm gonna go listen for "Shot Down,
I'm telling
Blaze
you,
of Glory."
the whole leading like the bridge to the chorus. It sounds, I don't know.
You know, the interesting thing is about that, Jimmy, is that Quorthon couldn't sing then, and John Bon Jovi can't sing now. So maybe there's something going on there.
I'm just saying, go listen to it and tell me I'm wrong, because I'm telling you, that's why
I am gonna go listen to that song.
Dude, I
again,
heard
yeah.
that song and I was like, okay. And then there's a moment later, like in the next track, that sounds like there's something from Bon Jovi. I was like, I wonder if maybe he just kind of took those good melodies that kind of like sounded epic. Because let's be real, that was a pretty epic kind of sounding song.
Oh yeah, same thing
Bon
with
Jovi, catalog. But
sure.
yeah, I don't know. But anyway, going further, I don't know. I probably just broke the internet by doing that. Next, but
I'm gonna look
being
for.
honest, that's what I heard, but go ahead.
I'm gonna look for. Cause I'm wanted, dead or alive.
Well, it's
I'm looking
funny
for
because
that.
like when he goes into the chorus, though, it's one of those moments where he gets really strained and he's like, it's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a couple moments in there that are so cringy.
yeah. But
Okay.
I will say though, for this record, what I mean, redeems the. I shouldn't say redeems the whole thing because it is a good record. I do like it. The last song, the track Hammerheart, that song is epic as epic can be.
And that's actually the one song he didn't write. That was a.
That's what I was wondering. Who wrote that?
It's
Gustav.
Holtz.
Yeah,
Or-
Holtz.
Yeah,
It's
Okay,
one
I
of the
was
songs from
gonna
the
say.
planet.
it's the planet. Yeah, it's from the. It's
Okay.
Mars, I believe. I
Yeah.
I was going to say, because if he wrote that, I was like, how did he write that? Because that sounds way out of his palette.
No, it's even listed in the booklet. Like it says that the music's by Gustav Holst and rearranged by Quorthon.
Well, still, he does it wonderfully. It's epic as hell. I don't know. I just love how he does that track.
Well, tell you what. I'm gonna go next and let you guys wrap it up with it because I've got some positive and some negative to say, and I'll let you two guys then wrap up with maybe more positive stuff. So for me, the first song, Twilight of the Gods, killer epic track, mid tempo, cool guitars, until that weird little part before the first lead. There's a killer lead in this first song but he does that weird little fucking transition thing that it's a bunch of like step down notes that I didn't quite understand. It just that bothered me for some reason. But that's a cool track. Through Blood by Thunder opens, cool guitar, great guitar backing vocals actually sound pretty good on this. He adds a lot more backing vocals on this album than even over Hammerheart to my ears. But again, the vocals are difficult to enjoy. Blood and Iron, acoustic noodling. Did you guys notice this, or is it just me? Does it seem like on that song, Blood and Iron, when he's playing the acoustic, that's where he goes out of tune a bunch? Like, some of the notes and chords are even like slightly out of tune to me. I don't know. Maybe it's my ears. The heavy guitars on it are super cool. Really like that song though. Once it gets going, Under the Ruins. Again, a lot of acoustic intros on most of these songs. Almost every song has an acoustic intro. You get again. This song, Under the Ruins, really shows Quorthon's strong writing composition improvement. Massively got more and more complex and better. The vocals, again, meh. Good song, ruined by vocals. That's what I wrote. What's the last thing here? Okay, so for this one, hold on. See, Bond, what's that called? Bond of Blood?
Bond of Blood, yeah.
It's terrible. I can't even read my own writing. Bond of Blood and To Enter Your Mountain, they sort of sounded like the same song for me. I do think that this album is a little long. And I think if they'd have cut off To Enter Your Mountain or Bond of Blood, that it would have been, and those are my two least favorite tracks on the album. I think it would have been a stronger album. Again, probably an 8 out of 10 for music, and I jumped him up from a 3 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10 on vocals. But man, those vocals, oh Jesus, like dude, I just unlike you, Tyler, who said as you got older, you got a better appreciation for it. I don't think that's going to happen with me. I mean, let's just assume I live another couple of years, which is unlikely. But if I do, I just don't think I'm going to love those vocals ever. It's just something about the whine. I do want to go listen to that. What song did you say, Jimmy, to listen for Bon Jovi? You're muted.
Under the Ruins.
That's the
Yeah, Under the Ruins.
Actually, that might. Wait a minute. Is Under the Ruins the one that sounds like a real hair metal song? It's got the really cool.
Yeah.
It's got the
Okay. It's got the cool sort of 80s hair metal riffs in it.
That song fucking rock.
I like that song. That's
Yeah, no, it's
good.
good. It's really good. I just
heard Bon Jovi in it. Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy just gave me a stroke by saying it sounds like Bon Jovi.
I'm going to listen for that tonight. All right, Tyler, you're up on this one.
All right. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, after the Jubileum albums, this is the first album I actually listened to by Bathory. So, there's probably a lot of nostalgia attached to this. But I actually, it's weird because his singing style is not much different between this and Hammerheart. It's a little better, as you said, but I actually liked his vocals on this. Like even the first time I ever listened to this, I was like, I can get into this. And I liked that epic scope. And I don't know, back when I was getting these albums, when I saw a band was hammering out like, 10, 15, 20-minute songs that wasn't like prog, I was impressed and I really liked that shit. So I don't mind the length of this album at all. But one thing I'm surprised you guys haven't really touched on yet is the overall theme and the overall tone of this album. To me, like even vocally, has a more somber tone because originally this was to be the last Bathory album. He wasn't going to continue the project after this album. Okay. It was later reissues that added. Every Bathory album has that outro, that kind of creepy, creeping doom outro type thing. The original vinyl press of this didn't have that because it was going to be the final album, and then I guess he just decided that it's not going to be the final album, and he needed to keep it going. Which is why I'm really curious now. Obviously, we're going to get into it at another time when we get to the back half of the discography. But I find it interesting that they, say Requiem and Octagon had a full band because that's so obviously a drum machine and everything's so programmed on that. Anyway, but back to this. Yeah, even as a teenager, when I got into this, I recognized that this is just a very somber album. And every time I put this on, I would just, I get very contemplative, and I would just like think about shit. And I don't know, it struck a mood with me, and it still does. I throw it on now, and I just sit and just think. I get lost in the music, and I just think about life stuff. And there again, that could be that nostalgia thing from being the first album I ever heard from Bathory, and just kind of
probably, yeah,
attaching those good memories to that. But
yep.
I don't know, it made a big impact on me, and this album is the reason why I got into Bathory. So like I said, the Viking trilogy, it's interchangeable which ones are my favorite. It depends on my mood, for sure. But yeah, like I love this album, and now I'm gonna have to go back and listen to Under the Runes and listen for Bon Jovi and be sad.
Yeah,
even though I
right.
like Bon Jovi, I fully admit I like Bon Jovi. Fucking Runaway
Well,
is a kick-ass song.
Oh man, dude's
yeah.
shit. What was the album with was it Slippery When Wet? That was with Wanted Dead or Alive?
Yeah, that
Right?
was the hit album. The Wanted Dead or Alive.
I only ever owned 2 Bon Jovi albums. I owned Fahrenheit 7800, which was pretty good, man. That had like In and Out of Love and Tokyo Rose, and there was some good jams on there. And then I owned, of course, Slippery When Wet, which I can't remember any songs off of other than. Oh wait, Shot Through the Heart, was that on there?
Yeah, You Give Love a Bad Name or Shot Through the Heart.
Okay. Okay.
That's on.
And
That's
then that was the other big hit off there, right? And then there was, the Cowboy or the
Bad Medicine.
Oh, that's right.
Bad
Your Love Is Like
Medicine.
Bad Medicine, yeah. But I never carried on after that. Like I remember when New Jersey came out, my buddy got it, and I'm like, I'm over these guys quick, because they were always right there with like, for me in the hair metal thing, they were always kind of the more obviously more radio friendly. So when I got into the hair metal, I liked the stuff that was a little nastier, the LA hair metal, the Rat, even Striper, for fuck's sake. I know they were. We talked about this one stream a while ago. They had some fucking riffs, man. They still do, actually. I mean, they're still a really riffy, heavy band. They just sing about Jesus too much, which I don't even really pay attention to. I will admit that I'm one of these guys that the older I get now,
sorry, reading comments.
The less I pay attention to lyrics at all. What was the matter? What happened?
No, I'm reading the comments and
look at Nick's last comment.
Actually, hang on. Before I get to that, I gotta admit, Frederick might be onto something here. The one thing I will say about Corthon is that he did seem to kind of, as much as he was an innovator and a creator, he did seem to at times chase certain things. That's probably a better way to say it in terms of not being a plagiarist. He was more of a copier of what was going on at the time. He was a reflection of that, I guess, a mirror of that. I agree with you, dude.
It makes sense. I mean, it still happens to this day in metal.
I saw Bon Jovi one time, and it was with Rat, and Rat was the headliner. It was for Fahrenheit 7800, and Rat was on the second album, Invasion. Yeah, Invasion.
Was George Lynch there?
What's that? Was
George Lynch there?
George Lynch was not there. He was not playing on that gig. Sorry, smart ass motherfucker. And I also saw Rat for Out of the Cellar too. It was Motley Crue headlining. Rat was opening, and Accept was the middle band. Accept was kind of the odd one out there. What did Nick say here? It's got to be. I'm sure it's funny.
Oh yeah, we're going down Bon Jovi discography now.
It's all Jimmy's. Listen,
Surprise,
it's all Jimmy's fault. Yeah, that's probably not gonna happen here.
No, I hope not.
Yeah. Devon, what you got to say about this one? I think you enjoy this one quite a bit more than the last one, right?
Yeah, this is like basically Hammerheart, but actually enjoyable. I don't really hear Bon Jovi. I need to go listen to that again, maybe, but My favorite
You know,
song
we're all gonna go listen to that song after we get off here.
yeah, I know. My favorite song is honestly Bound of Blood or Through Blood by Thunder, but I agree the vocals are a little bit better. It's maybe like a 8.5 as a music and like a 5 on the vocals, but his vocals got worse, believe it or not. Once we get to Octagon, you will hear what I mean about that record, but that's for next time. So,
How about Devin? How about you? What we'll do with this final part here before we wrap up. And I don't know if any of you guys want to do a post stream, let me know. I know some of you guys have to work. Maybe I know it's early out there for you, where we can get into other stuff. Just let me know. But I know Nick's on, and maybe Frederick will want to jump on. But let me know, guys. But if you had to sum up the first half of the catalog, what would you say about the first half of the catalog, Tyler? As far as what it meant to you as a metalhead.
Well, as far as what it means to me as a metalhead, because like I said, I got into Bathory in a really roundabout way. So, like, I appreciate the influence, and I really learned to love his music. And yeah, I think I was talking about it with you via text, Jeff, where when Corthon passed, like when I read about that, that was like one of the very few times I've read about a musician that I liked passing away, and it actually affected me. I mean, I wasn't like holding sigils in my house and like, crying every day or anything like that, but it actually kind of cut a little bit. I was like, oh shit, we're not going to have any more Bathory music. Like, I don't know. It kind of hit hard. And like I said, getting into these guys as a teenager, they were among many of my early influences, on steering me in the direction of music I wanted to listen to, and really eventually the music I wanted to play as a drummer. And as far as like summing up the first half of the catalog, it's just one word: influential. Like, that's just the most simple way of putting it, because whether or not he's copying riffs from other bands and like, basically, paying tribute to whatever is influencing him, despite saying that he's not influenced by them, you can't deny the impact that this first half of the catalog had just on the future of really just metal in general. Not just black metal, not just Viking metal, but I mean, anybody who naysays Bathory, I'm sure their favorite bands probably listen to Bathory, And so in a roundabout way, the naysayers are still Bathory fans, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just like I really felt it was important to collect these albums, to have these albums in my collection. And luckily I actually thoroughly enjoy these albums. And honestly, of these first 6, The Return's the one I actually like the least. And it's not because it's bad. It's just none of this. There's only a couple songs that really jump out and really stand out to me. The first album had way more memorable tracks, and obviously Under the Sign just had all the memorable tracks. But yeah, just influential. That's the best way to sum up the first half of the catalog.
That's a good way to put it. Jimmy, you got any thoughts on the first half of the catalog? Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this real quick before you go into that. When I approached you about this, you initially said, maybe I'm the wrong guy to do this. And I totally understood why, because in a weird way, I kind of felt that way myself. But I also thought, you know what? This would be a challenging one to do, because it's going to make me go revisit those albums and see if something different struck me. And in my case, for the most part, I can say it was a pretty positive experience. It was a good experience. I'm wondering if it affected you the same way. It sounds like it might have.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely did. And I actually, like, when I told you that, Jeff, I kind of like walked it back a little bit later that day to myself.
Yep.
Because I was thinking, because I was like in the mindset, I was like, I shouldn't like talk about a band, if I don't find them amazing and like they've been through my whole life. And I thought, you know what, that's kind of stupid. Like it's good to have a different perspective. Whoever's going to be on these streams. I took it seriously, and I went and deep dive down the records and listened to them a lot, and found what I always love about these deep dives is I always come away with it from a newfound appreciation, and that's what's important about these things. So yeah, I almost kind of regretted just like saying that to you, because like it was like, well, anybody's like fair game to come and do this if you're gonna take it seriously and try to give an honest perspective on where you are in your journey
Exactly.
with all this music. You know what I mean? And yeah, so for me, I'm very appreciative of that we've done it, and like I spent a lot of time the last week really just delving into these records, and I have even more appreciation for it than I did before. But I will say that for me, it's also really important because like I'm a big like history buff. Like I love like reading like about world wars and stuff like that.
Sure.
And
Right.
big into, like American history and things like that. So it's pretty crazy. But if you think about it, I mean, a lot of this music is like almost 50 years old. I mean,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Can you even like comprehend that? I mean, like we're all like, we're all like young in spirit, like we're all still pretty, we're not old, elders.
Well,
but I
Devin's
mean,
just
like,
young.
Shit. Oh shit! What happened? Okay, I kicked Jimmy off. Hold on.
Man,
I kicked you off because I anticipated you were going to say we're all young in spirit except Jeff. He's old as fucking dirt.
no. I mean, like, well, but I mean, like, we're not that far, I mean, like, so, like, I get it. You wanted to like censor me real quick, but you get my point. Is
I'm
that
kidding.
like,
I hit the wrong button. I was trying to get you out of
like,
solo.
regardless of our ages, like, I mean, this music is nearly 50 years old. That's pretty crazy, because if I think about like history that I read, a lot of history I read is only 50 years old too, or maybe like 100 years or whatever. And I can't believe that this music that we all love, that's always been part of our youths or whatever, is becoming real history. So I think it's really important, and I've really done, just delving into that aspect of it. Whether I'm like a huge fan of the stuff or not, I just want to be like, and make it very clear that, the stuff that didn't like blow my mind, I'm very, very appreciative of, and see the value in what people dig, whether I love it or not. You know what I mean? So
I wasn't really gonna let you out of it unless you'd said, "Dude, I can't do it because of work." Or
well, I said it, but you cut
something
me
like
off, so you didn't hear me. So
Oh, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
I said, except for that old fuck, but yeah. And then as soon as I said it, you cut it off, and then it ruined the whole thing. And then you like figured out that I said it, so now everybody knows. So
There you go.
What's done is done. So it's
Well, here's the thing. Put this in perspective. This will really put it in perspective. In 1984, Devon, you were what, 9 years before you were born?
84.
Or 10 years?
Let me think. I was negative 14.
14.
good Lord.
Okay. Tyler, in 1984, how old were you?
What's that?
How old were you in 1984, Tyler? Do you want to say on camera?
Oh, 6 years old.
Okay. Jimmy, how old were you?
84. I'd have been 6, same as Tyler. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In 1984, I was graduating high school. This album came out after I graduated high school. I probably got laid for the first time just before this album came out. So there you go. Not that anybody cares or gives a shit about that, but and I definitely was drinking beers way before this album came out. And this guy was actually a month older than me. He was 6 weeks older than me. So if he was still alive, he'd be 56 years old, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I look at this catalog as what this did for me was it made me go back and listen to some stuff that I didn't have quite the appreciation that I thought I did for it. In other words, if you'd have come up to me and said, "Hey man, I got I got Dock and Under Lock and Key, I got The Warning from Queensryche, or this Bathory album, which one do you want to listen to first?" I've been like, well, just do the Bathory one last. Now I'm not so sure I'd say that. That I really gathered a lot of appreciation for the first 4 albums.
You're
and
welcome.
Like Tyler, thank you, Devon. I'm gonna let you talk last. Like Tyler said, The Return's probably my least favorite of the bunch, even though it's kind of looked at as the template for. But if my health gets regulated here shortly and I'm around for a little while, I probably will pick those first 4 Bathory up. Beyond that, I'm not sure yet. I really like the music. The vocals really are a struggle for me, and that would make it tough. But Devin, you want to sum everything up for me? And then as for Nick, Frederick, yeah, I'll start a post stream, and then if Tyler wants to jump in, or Devin, or Jimmy, or whatever, we'll talk about that at the end.
So to me, this ends era 1 because after this, he kind of abandoned the Viking style for 2 albums, then went back to the style again. So this like puts a good end point on the first era that he goes in the second era. But yeah, I agree. They were definitely, obviously, they were banned. They weren't the only one, but they were definitely a major influence on the scene. But
yeah, influence is a good word. Innovator, I don't think that's quite the right word. I just don't hear.
I only say innovator because of Under the Sign, that record.
I agree partially. I don't agree fully. I get what you're saying, and I would say that's the album to point to for sure. But is it really? I still don't hear some of the hallmarks of first wave black metal, which are, the all out relentless blast beats, the fucking horrible vocals, the anguished, and they are some of those early vocals on the Mysterious Dub Satanas, like the dead vocals, man.
So it's not this.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's better than that.
But you're right, man. I mean, definitely a huge influence. So, all right, guys, I'm not going to promise about part 2. We'll talk about that privately and see if we can come up with something. I would say that the sooner, the better, because I just don't know. Like, if you see, I'm always laying down. I have to lay down to do a lot of these, and it's getting harder and harder. I'm starting to atrophy in my neck muscles and my leg muscles. I have to get up and move. Sometimes it's very difficult. So the quicker we can do it, the better. We'll talk about that privately. But I don't know, Tyler, how was it your first time? Was it painless?
Oh, this is great. I mean, it helps that it's a band that I grew up with and really enjoy. So I'm not diving into something that I don't listen to very much. Like I would have been a fish out of water with, like, say, the Blue Downs North discussions.
Well, we'll work on that. We're going to work on that Bon Jovi deep dive as well, too. So get ready for that coming down the road.
We'll just talk about the first 2-3 albums, then we'll be good.
And just to tell everyone, Devin, you did a fine job on the history there. I appreciate you doing that.
We got to talk more than normal, so that's good.
Well, you actually tried to talk for a change tonight, so I appreciate that. Jimmy, I appreciate it. And hold on a second. I'm gonna end the stream, but you guys all stay on. We can talk privately real quick for just a moment.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, yep. Cheers to everybody that was there. Thralls, Nick, I'll hit you up. Frederick, look in your Instagram in a little bit. Give me 5-10 minutes. I got to take a piss, get a drink of water, and I'm going to end the stream now. I appreciate it. We will get back to you shortly about part 2. And, yeah, so thanks, guys.